Grey dawn clung to the battlements of Winterfell like breath upon cold iron, each stone dark with last night's rain. The wind had an edge that smelled of pine pitch and distant snowmelt, promising another hard northern planting. Robb Stark stood on the parapet above the outer gatehouse, leather-gloved hands resting on the rough merlons, his cloak lifting behind him in slow, thoughtful beats. Below, courtyard life stirred awake. Stable lads hauling oat sacks, Glover men fitting hooves with new shoes, Arya's lone direwolf weaving between barrels in search of scraps. It was the music of home, the pulse of a keep older than half the kingdoms combined. And yet it felt strangely hushed this morning, as if Winterfell itself waited for him to speak first. He had slept little. In the hours before dawn, Maester Luwin's raven had come scratching against the rookery shutter, a pale-winged ghost, delivering words woven in loops of deep green ink. Lord Mace Tyrell, pompous, overfed, gleaming in Tyroshi perfumes even through parchment, had made an offer. No, not Lord Mace. Robb knew whose quill had truly guided the letter. Lady Olenna's caustic wit revealed itself in the neat suggestion that war between North and Crown need not carve another graveyard across the realm if a marriage knit Highgarden and Winterfell instead. The Tyrells would pledge gold, grain, and swords. In return, the king in the north would take their rose as queen. Margaery Tyrell, 16. Keen-eyed, possessed of both courtesy and a reputation for turning men's heads like sunflowers to the light. Robb felt the chill despite his cloak. Once, before the whisper of crowns and kingdoms, he might have smiled at the notion of young love and alliances forged at harvest feasts. But war had ground away childish romance. Marriage was strategy now, a wall against the cold blades of the Lannisters, the Freys, the myriad petty lords who sniffed opportunity in northern blood. He traced a gauntleted finger over the parapet's age-scored grooves and tried to picture brown-haired Margaery walking these walls beside him, lilies embroidered on velvet swirling above the dark northern mud. The image refused to settle. Footsteps padded behind him, quiet, measured, unmistakably his mother's. Catelyn Stark moved with a grace weather-worn and tempered by grief. She joined him at the parapet, folding her hands against the chill. "You've read the letter," she said. "Not a question." "I have." Robb kept his gaze on the yard. "And?" He exhaled, misting the air. "It would bring the Reach to our cause. Bread for hungry camps, gold for smithies, and 70,000 spears if the songs are half true." Catelyn's eyes were gray-blue as shattered ice. "And what would it bring to your heart?" "My heart can wait." The words tasted of iron. "The North cannot. Do not sell yourself short, Robb." Her gloved hand brushed his cloak hem, a mother's small reminder of simpler days. A king's heart beats for his people, but without its own strength it falters. If you make her your queen, see her truly, not only her banners. He almost laughed. Instead, he dropped his gaze to the courtyard again. Bran's wheeled chair rattled over flagstones near the weirwood gate, pushed by Septon Chael. Rickon ran circles around them, wooden sword in hand. Grey Wolf Shaggy Dog bounding like a black storm cloud at his heels. Family. He remembered Sansa's songs about gallant knights and dew-soft maidens. Songs that had shattered the day Ned Stark's head left its pike on Baelor's sept. Could Margaery Tyrell mend such fractures? Could anyone? Catelyn's cloak rustled. Lord Renly is dead, Stannis hounded on the Blackwater, and Joffrey skulks behind red walls. The Tyrells chose their moment well. They will not risk their roses unless the soil is rich. Robb nodded. They fear Lannister rule and truth. Highgarden's harvests feed half the realm. They will not kneel to a lion that would gnaw the vines bare. They seek our wolves as shield, and we seek their fields as bread. So the dance turns. She lifted her chin. "I will write Lord Tyrell an answer. A courteous one. But we must see the girl before vows are inked. I would look in her eyes myself. I thought of sending you south, and leave you here, ringed by Freys and Karstarks snapping at one another's throats?" She shook her head. "No, my son. Let Lady Margaery come to us first. If she would wear wolf's fur, let her feel its bite. Then Robb almost smiled. "You'd have her cross half the kingdoms. It is no small thing, choosing sides in a civil war. She should see what she weds. Catelyn's gaze swept Winterfell. The ragged battlements, the smoke rising from distant forges, the silent godswood whose red leaves whispered secrets older than crowns. Let her walk beneath the heart tree. The old gods will know her truth. Robb imagined the Reach's gilded courtiers stepping inside that shadowed grove. He pictured Margaery's southern silks brushing roots stained with ancient sap. Would she flinch? Or would she breathe in the cool resin scent and bow her head with grace? He found he wanted to know. A horn sounded at the distant gate. Riders, their outlines dark against the pale north sky. Scouts from Deepwood Motte. A guard called. Lord Glover returns. Robb's thoughts scattered like ravens. Duty called. War seldom paused for rumination. Yet as he strode along the parapet toward the stairs, the letter's weight remained tucked inside his jerkin. Each word a seed pressing against his ribs. When they, Highgarden basked beneath a forgiving sun, the day the raven took wing for the north. Cream-colored walls climbed in singing arches above rivers of jasmine, the air heavy with bees and the lazy whisper of silken banners. In a now quiet morning, Solar Margaery Tyrell sat beside a lattice window, carding her long brown hair with deliberate strokes. Each movement was unhurried, as though time itself listened for her signal before it dared to pass. Across from her Lady Olenna reclined on an upholstered chair, a cup of mulled wine warming her thin, deliberate fingers. "Your posture grows thoughtful, child," the Queen of Thorns observed. "Does the notion of snow daunt you already?" Margaery smiled, soft, composed. "I wonder what colors grow in snow. Even winter yields some bloom, grandmother." "Ha!" Olenna's gray brows danced. "Bloom, yes, as long as you plant them in sturdy soil. The Starks are trustworthy as granite, but granite cracks if struck too hard. You'll need warmth to thaw them out." "Then, warmth is easily given," Margaery said. She rose, crossing to a low table where a map lay unfurled. Westeros traced in inks of ochre and blue, the north a broad smudge of white. She touched a fingertip to Winterfell. "I will bring sunshine on my sleeves." Olenna sipped, watching. "Do not mistake them for idiots, sweetling. Northern men prize honesty, not simply smiles. They will smell false spring quicker than a sow smells truffles." "Esumnio. I intend honesty." Margaery met her gaze. "I intend to learn their songs, their gods. All of it. Their gods have bark for skin and bleed red sap. At least the 7 light candles and look pretty in a sept." Olenna clicked her tongue. "But a Tyrell must adapt. The realm rots. Lannister coin poisons every purse. Your brothers play their part. Swords shining in whomever's light seems brightest each season. You, darling, must anchor this family before Lord Macy's vanity sails us straight into storm." "Done." Margaery gave a modest nod. Outside, the hush of the rose gardens drifted in, fragrant and nigh eternal. It would be a far cry from pine forests and gray wolves. She did not fear cold, yet she feared insignificance, becoming another pawn married off and forgotten. So she studied. She read every scrap on Northern law, on Stark lineage, on bannermen feuds older than Aegon's conquest. She practiced riding in heavier wool cloaks, dined on hard oatbreads, even pricked her fingers on ice-chilled iron, so she might feel something of the snows before she met them. Olenna rose with slow care, leaning on her carved cane. "Remember your words, growing strong. It is not only flowers that grow. Resolve does, too." Margaery folded the map, slid it into a leather roll. Her heartbeat measured drums. A journey of 1,000 leagues awaited, a court of wolves and their quiet gods. Yet beyond the road's uncertainty lay possibility. Peace between north and south. Yes, but also autonomy, the power to shape fate rather than drift upon it. Her lips curved slightly. Winter might prove fertile ground after all. Undal. 300 leagues south, in the red-stained halls of King's Landing. Queen Cersei Lannister poured sweet arbor wine and let it swirl around her golden ring like blood in a chalice. Sir Osmond Kettleblack stood at attention near the door, face dull as summer mud. But her focus rested on the gaunt man across the gilded table. Petyr Baelish. Littlefinger smiled his perennial half-smile, arms folded within a doublet of midnight velvet. Another raven from Highgarden, he asked, though of course he already knew. Cersei's knuckles whitened. They whisper with Robb Stark now. Myrcella sits alone behind Dornish walls, Tommen clutches his kittens, and the Tyrell girl dares barter her maidenhead to a traitor king. An uncrowned king, Petyr reminded politely. There is still debate on titles. Not in the north. She refilled her cup, sloshing crimson onto the parchment between them. Margaery's likeness blurred. If the Tyrells wed their rose to him, our grip on the reach loosens like old stitches. We may yet strangle in the thread. Petyr folded his hands. May I offer a salve? Cersei's green eyes flickered. Speak. A wedding is maneuver, your grace, not victory itself. Lady Margaery must first reach Winterfell alive, escorted through leagues of uncertain road. Bandits abound. War leaves many hungry wolves, some wearing sigils, some wearing none at all. She studied him. And you would unleash such wolves? I unleash nothing. He lifted shoulders in faux humility. I merely observe that travelers without Lannister escort may find peril in the Riverlands, where certain sellsword companies roam beyond their captain's control. Cersei's lip curled. Your tongue plays music I tire of. Baelish. Be plain. Plain is crude, and crude leads to heads on spikes. Subtlety ensures the world forgets who guided the knife. Petyr's smile sharpened. Should some misfortune delay Lady Margaery, should a small folk uprising plunder her train, Highgarden might reconsider throwing petals into a snowstorm. They might remain safely in the Reach, connected to the crown by marriage to his grace instead. Cersei imagined Joffrey pressing a capering kiss upon Margaery's hand, Tyrell gold replenishing the vaults. Olenna forced to bow before her. The corners of her mouth rose. Do you have men for this subtlety? I have friends. Baelish spread his fingers as though scattering dice. But friends grow costly. Guarantee me Harrenhal without contest, and they become obedient. Harrenhal is cursed. And yet cursed lands yield splendid harvests, I hear. He inclined his head. A legacy suitable for the son of nothing. A fitting price for peace. Cersei's wine tasted less sweet than before. She saw again Ned Stark's severed head, but now behind it hovered a new queen's face framed in brown hair and rosebuds. Cold slipped down her spine. Do it, she said. Littlefinger's smile did not widen, yet triumph shimmered in the lines of his cheeks. As you wish, your grace. Run. Riverrun thrummed with the river's pulse, swollen from meltwaters rushing off the mountains. Catelyn Stark dismounted beneath the stone fishtail banner, mud spattering her riding skirt. The fortress smelled of wet stone and iron, but its towers felt safer than any since Ned's fall. Here her brother Edmure paced ramparts fretting about grain tithes, and great-uncle Brynden Blackfish commanded scouts along the Red Fork. Here ravens might alight without being spied by Casterly Rock's golden eyes. Inside the great hall, candles glimmered across long tables. Lords of the Trident rose to greet the Queen Regent of the North. Malisters in silver-winged helms, Brackens and Blackwoods seated awkwardly apart. But her attention found the stooped maester near the dais. Any word? Lady Stark. The maester's chain rattled. The Tyrell party left Bitterbridge 2 weeks ago. Progress is swift, but roads are watchful. Lord Randall Tarley commands the escort. 500 armored knights, as Lord Mace promised. Tarley, the Blackfish snorted. I'd sooner parley with a boar. Catelyn ignored him. Has my son arrived? King Robb holds fast at Mo Cailin. Frey levies muster along the Green Fork. He seeks to honor you by waiting. Honor? Brynden murmured, eyeing the hall's rafters where river swallows nested. Walder Frey slithers behind every chivalry like a leech in bathwater. Catelyn placed a calming hand on his arm. We will see the twins soon enough. She lifted her voice for the assembly. Prepare quarters for Lord Tarley's men when they come, and have fresh northern cloaks sewn for Lady Margaery's retinue. She felt many gazes flick toward her then. Some questioned the match, others welcomed it as salvation. All weighed their own futures on unseen scales. That evening, she walked the battlements alone, listening to water slap stone. Distant torches marked sentry boats gliding across moonlit currents. Were those currents like threads tying the realm, or knives ready to sever? She thought of Robb, still barely a man by Summerhall reckonings, now burdened with crowns and fresh vows. She thought of Margaery, unknown yet crucial. The old gods whispered through willows along the riverbank. She prayed silently, as mother, as queen, as frantic soul. Let her be kind. Let him be steady. Let this war end before the snow buries us all. When the Reach caravan moved like a jeweled serpent across Westeros, emerald pennants snapping, rose-pink coach panels gleaming. Each dawn bards plucked harps before breakfast beneath linen awnings, but by midday, the road's harsh rhythm banished music. Dust-coated silks, and the laughter of novices faded under heavy helms. Margaery rode not in cushioned coach, but astride a tall white mare, Garland's gift, Snowdrop. She wore a travel cloak of dark green wool trimmed in pale fox fur, southern compromise between vanity and northern necessity. At her side, the massive figure of Brienne of Tarth towered in sapphire armor, head bowed as if apologizing for her height. Sir Loras led a vanguard ahead, golden armor catching sun, though his smile had grown brittle under constant watch for crossbow quarrels. On the 10th day, as they wound between hills of the northern riverlands, a rider approached under white flag. Brienne's blade rasped free until banners identified him as a Blackwood outrider. He brought news. Bands of sellswords sighted beyond the next ridge. Men in ragged half-armors, killing livestock and vanishing. Lord Tarly frowned, issuing double scouts. But Margaery watched the messenger's eyes and saw dread deeper than the report. Something hunted them. That night, fires burned low. Margaery walked the perimeter with Brienne, boots sinking into damp leaf litter. Star's spear pointed the sky. "My lady should sleep," Brienne murmured, voice like rolling oaks. "I will soon." Margaery paused to listen to a nightjar's call, 3 notes rising and falling. "Does fear nest in your heart, Sir Brienne? Fear keeps swords ready, yet too much dulls them." Margaery touched the taller woman's plated forearm. "I do not wish fear to blind us." Brienne's face softened, uncanny in firelight. "You ride toward wolves. Some would call that folly." "Some would." Margaery smiled, distant. "Yet wolves mate for life," said Brienne. "And roses, though fragile, wear thorns sharper than fangs." The next dawn revealed smoke along the horizon, fresh, black, oily. The column tightened ranks. Throughout the afternoon, distant hoofbeats echoed among hills. Shadows flickered at tree lines. A tattered standard depicting a manticore. Then gone. Sir Loras urged caution, but Tarly pressed on. "Bandits flee strength," he claimed. "They will not strike knights in array." At twilight, the ambush fell. It began with flaming arrows. Fiery shafts hissed overhead, landing in supply wagons. Horses shrieked. Drivers tumbled beneath wheels. From the scrub rushed men in mismatched mail, faces hidden behind cudgels and rust-pocked axes. Their leader wore a red cloak pinned with yellow glass that mocked Lannister colors. His grin burned as bright as torches. Tarly's vanguard met them with shields locked, but the sellswords swarmed like fire ants splitting columns. Amidst the chaos, Margaery wheeled Snowdrop in search of safety, Brienne a wall at her flank. A wild line cut between them and the main host, 5 men bearing hooked spears. Brienne's sword swept out, cleaving a spear shaft. Another thrust scraped her pauldron. One brigand lunged for Margaery's reins. Brienne's backstroke opened his throat scarlet. Behind, a second wave crashed upon the baggage train. Burning oil soaked canvas. A storehouse wagon exploded in sparks. Margaery's heart hammered. She spotted a low dell where fallen logs formed cover. "There!" she cried, steering Snowdrop. Brienne followed, parrying. The dell's hollow offered momentary reprieve, but screams echoed on all sides. Through smoke, Margaery glimpsed Loras, helm missing, hair dark with blood as he dueled 2 at once. Tarly roared commands she could not parse. The air stank of horse entrails and smoked grain. She clenched the mare's reins, whispering calming words. Suddenly a shadow loomed on the ridge. Flag of a direwolf silver on field of ice blue. Horn blasts answered, deep, resonant, 3 times. Out of the eastern darkness surged Northmen. Their charge thundered like falling trees. Great John Umber at 4, 2-handed axe swinging, grey wind darting in his wake. Northern war horns wailed, and sellswords broke like crusted snow under Thawdoct. Robb Stark himself led the center, crimson cloak flying. His sword hammered a brigand aside before Robb's gaze snapped toward the dell. In 3 leaps, grey wind covered the distance, snarling at remaining attackers. Brienne's sword paused, uncertain. The dire wolf circled, but did not strike her. Robb reined in next to Margaery, cheeks smeared with soot. "My lady," he said, voice hoarse yet steady, "you are unharmed." Margaery's heartbeat slowed as though the world inhaled. She studied him. Taller than rumor, hair coppery in firelight, eyes gray and alert. Not a boy. Not the hardened iron of Stannis or the serpentine shine of the Lannisters, but something tempered and alive. She inclined her head. "I am whole thanks to your timely charge, your grace." Robb's jaw flexed. "Your escort proved stout. We finished what they started." He glanced at Brienne. "My thanks, sir." Brienne bowed stiffly. Snowdrop tossed her mane. Grey wind sniffed, deciding she was not prey. Around them, the battle dwindled. Sellswords fled into twilight. Northern outriders gave chase. Fires hissed in wagon frames, but the living outnumbered the dead. Robb dismounted, offering a gauntleted hand. "There is a healer in my camp. Please, allow me to see you safe." Margaery slid down, boots crunching ash. She did not take his hand. Instead, she met his eyes unflinching. Around them, sparks drifted like fireflies. The war's roar faded to crackling wood. "The road has carried me far," she said softly. "But I believe it has reached its purpose." For a breath their surroundings vanished. Only their 2 figures remained, framed by embers in dusk. Robb opened his mouth, perhaps to utter some courtesy. Yet no words came. He simply inclined his head and gestured toward the northern camp. Side by side they walked through smoke. Behind, Brienne followed. Ahead, grey wind loped, guiding them as surely as any herald. Margaery felt the chill of night settle, but within her chest warmth flourished, tentative sharp like the first crocus breaking frozen soil. "I won." The northern host's encampment sprawled along a low ridge sheltered by rock outcrops. Cook fires flickered beneath hanging kettles, and the scent of onion broth mingled with pitch. Healers tended wounded by torchlight, men muttering prayers to old gods and new. Robb led Margaery to a pavilion that served as command tent, its entrance flanked by 2 gray-cloaked shoulders of House Mormont. Inside, maps of tanned hide lay pinned with bone daggers. The air held warmth from a brazier, but also tension. Karstark captains debating supply lines, Lord Bolton's quiet eyes reflecting flame. Conversation hushed when Margaery entered. She felt their stares weigh her like merchants across a scale. Is she fragile, cunning, or both? She met each gaze, offering a nod. Strength, yes, but gentle. Enough to bend without breaking. Robb dismissed the captains, save for the Blackfish, who remained to stand sentinel near the flap. "You'll find the north less formal than courts of King's Landing," he said, pouring water into a tin cup. "We lack perfumed fountains, I'm afraid. Perfume only masks rot, your grace. Honest air is a virtue." She accepted the cup, sipped. Water tasted of iron and riverstone. Bracing? True. Your men fought bravely. They fight for their homes. That breeds sharper steel than gold. He leaned on a camp table. "I regret we met in fire rather than feet. Perhaps flame forges what feast alone cannot." She allowed a smile. "I will remember tonight. For its terror, yes, but also for salvation." Robb seemed to search her face, as though reading a language half forgotten. "Salvation implies surrender," he said. "I seek partnership, not rescue. Then we match." She placed the tin cup down. "I am no damsel to wilted frost." The Blackfish cleared his throat, hiding a curve of lips behind gray beard. Robb straightened. "We ride for Winterfell at dawn. Our healers will tend your wounded. Our forges will mend your armor." He hesitated. Lady Margaery, the north is harsh, yet it rewards endurance. If you mean to plant roots, they will need deep anchor. I have strong hands for digging." Her eyes shone. Outside, night deepened, but the chill in the command tent felt strangely tempered. Words heavier than iron passed unspoken, but their echoes rang. War yet raged. Lannister plots, Frey intrigues, southern crises. But inside this crude pavilion, two young sovereigns faced one another as equals for the first time. Later, while Star's wheel turned above the quieted camp, Robb stood beyond the ring of tents, gray winds fur at his side. Mists gathered over sleeping horses. Above, the sky stretched black and infinite, unmarred by southern smoke. He thought of the girl sleeping in the healer's tent, groomed on songs of nights, yet unbowed by bloodshed. Could such a rose weather winter? Could she accept gods carved in ancient faces of redwood? Robb knelt, pressing gloved fingertips into cold earth. "Father," he murmured to the ghost of Ned beneath those same stars, "I step onto stone you never trod. Guide my feet." Wind answered, carrying Pine's hymn. He rose, a decision forming like dawn beyond horizon. 5 tents away, Margaery stirred from shallow slumber. Smoke scent lingered in her hair. Memories of sparks and steel haunted each blink. Yet in her mind, Robb's gray eyes remained clear, unclouded by ambition's fever. She whispered to the Reach's absent orchids, to her future self, "Let me bring spring without melting the snow too soon." Sleep reclaimed her, soft as fur. Outside, the campfires burned low, embers glowing like scattered rubies under the wolf-guarded night. And 30 leagues northwest, beneath jagged towers of Harrenhal's cursed shell, a different fire smoldered. Steel-shod boots echoed through half-collapsed halls as Pettier Baelish oversaw the arrangement of his new domain. The vaults were bare, yet he walked them with the mien of a man admiring gold beyond count. In one corner, a messenger knelt, delivering parchment sealed with crimson wax. Pettier read it beneath a guttering torch, smile thinning. The ambush had failed. The rose yet bloomed beneath northern moon. He traced the parchment's edge thoughtfully, then folded it with care. So be it. There were other spider's threads. In the north, 1,000 hidden snares awaited maiden feet. And if not, well, even weddings held room for accidents. Pettier brushed soot from his sleeve and turned away, steps echoing into darkness. Harrenhal stones knew too many secrets to begrudge one more. Grin. Across snow-dusted moors the northern host pushed onward, banners snapping in brisk wind. Robb and Margaery rode abreast at times, at others parted by duty. Yet each dusk they found moments, sharing a trencher of rabbit stew, admiring aurora that rippled green across the firmament, laughing when gray wind stole a roasted turnip from Margaery's plate, surprised to find laughter still lived in wartime throats. On the 5th night, they camped beneath the looming statues of the King's Road Fellstones, ancient granite monarchs whose faces wind had eroded indistinct. There, Robb spoke of his father's stories around this very road, and Margaery described Lady Olenna's thorned advice. Words wove between them like threads: duty, fear, hope. "Will your faith abide, old gods?" Robb asked quietly. "My faith abides love of people above idols," she replied. "I will light any candle that guards the innocent." He pondered, then nodded. "The Weirwoods demand truth, nothing more." She shivered, though the night was mild. "Truth is a noble tyrant." Robb watched her profile in firelight, eyes reflecting orange, mouth poised. "Perhaps we rule it together. Perhaps." The words settled like snow on unbroken field. Dwa. When at last the towers of Winterfell rose ghost-pale on distant horizon, Margaery drew rein to behold them. 2 great keeps, one ancient, one young, crowned by spires of smoky color, stone bridge straddling hot springs-fed moat, steam curling from dark water. The sight awed her, but also pricked with melancholy. Here Ned Stark had ruled, here his bones rested. She thought of Catelyn, the Wolf Queen she must soon call mother, and her stomach fluttered. They entered through the broken outer gate, still under repair from Ironborn treachery. Small folk gathered, eyes wide at the southern procession. Some touched foreheads in greeting. Some merely stared at the Tyrell rose on Margaery's cloak. Children giggled at the bright plumes of Reach Knights. Dogs barked at horses. Warmth greeted her not from architecture, but from living souls who nodded when she smiled. In the great hall, banners hung: the grey direwolf, the flayed man of Bolton, the twin towers of Frey, each representing politics fractious and fragile. Atop the dais Catelyn Stark stood in heavy blue velvet, trimmed with white fox, Brynden at her shoulder. She gave no smile, only appraisal swift and cool as a Riverrun thaw. Margaery advanced alone, stopping 3 paces shy. She lowered to one knee, cloak pooling. "Lady Catelyn, I offer you the hand of a daughter, the strength of Highgarden, and the hope of peace." Catelyn's gaze flickered, perhaps at the practiced words, perhaps at the honesty beneath. She stepped closer, placing a ring-bearing hand atop Margaery's head. "Then rise, Margaery Tyrell, as guest of Winterfell. May the gods, old and new, judge your heart and find it true." Margaery rose, meeting eyes of grey. In them, she glimpsed grief older than the last snows and courage deeper than any mine. She inclined her head once more, then felt warm fingers squeeze her palm. A quick, silent welcome that startled her. When she looked again, Catelyn had already turned toward the audience, voice ringing as she declared feast. That night, Winterfell's hall brimmed with roast venison, onion gravy, baked turnips, mead spiced with juniper. Northern harpists plucked solemn chords, while Manderly singers attempted a lively reel. Amid laughter and wary stares, Robb and Margaery shared a platter and quiet moments. "Tomorrow," Catelyn announced above clamor, "the bridge ceremony will bind our houses under God's witness. First before the weirwood, then before 7 shrines, should Lady Margaery desire both." Margaery nodded. "I would honor all gods, that none be slighted." Murmurs rippled, some approving, others dubious. But Robb lifted his cup. "To unity," he said. "May our table hold room for many customs, so long as hearts remain just." Cups clanged in echo. Music rose, and the feast wore on. Beyond the arrow slits moonlight bathed the yard. In its pale hush Petyr's unseen snares tightened far away. Frey whispers brewed beneath crossing rivers, and Lannister lions licked wounds behind red walls. But for one night Winterfell's ancient stones rang with cautious hope. The laughter of a wolf king and a rose queen to be mingling under banners that for a heartbeat promised spring. Ryan. Midnight found Robb alone in the God's Wood, sword unbelted, kneeling before the heart tree. Red leaves rustled overhead, moonlight shimmering upon wet bark that glistened like frozen blood. Voices from the feast had faded, leaving only the hiss of distant pools. He pressed fingers to soil, thinking of vows unspoken. The face carved in white weirwood watched with unreadable patience. Steps crunched behind him. Soft, deliberate. Margaery appeared wearing a plain cloak of gray, hair loose, lantern in hand. She remained at the path's edge until he gestured. "The God's Wood is yours as much as mine," he said quietly. She approached, lifting the lantern. Its light painted her features, pale gold. "I wish to meet your gods as myself, not as performer before a crowd. They will know the difference." He gestured for her to kneel. She did, cloak brushing moss. For a breath, they shared silence before that scarlet face. Robb voiced a single line, barely louder than wind. "If the old gods accept you, they will let fall a leaf upon your shoulder." A small smile touched her mouth. "And if none falls, then the tree sees no need to prove what already is." He shrugged slightly. "The old gods enjoy riddles." Margaery tilted her head, listening to leaves rustle like whispered laughter. Her eyes closed, and Robb saw lashes rest against faint freckles. His chest tightened, with something he had not dared call yearning. Moments passed. Lantern light flickered. Then, silent as memory, a single crimson leaf drifted down, settling upon Margaery's cloak near her heart. Her lids lifted. She saw the leaf, fingers brushing it lightly. Her breath caught. Robb exhaled, a laugh lost somewhere between relief and wonder. "It seems," he said, voice gentle, "they like you." She smiled, not coy, not triumphant, but serene. "Then let us like each other in turn." He held her gaze. Night seemed to pause, the world listening. Slowly, he extended his scarred hand. She placed hers in it. Beneath the weirwood's silent witness, two lines of fate, once distant as north and south, intertwined. "Where? Amanuki." And so dawn approached. For Winterfell, for the realm, drawing breath before vows that would echo beyond castle walls. Yet far afield shadows gathered. The twins' lord counted coin and grudges, Bolton men sharpened flaying knives beneath banners half loyal, and across sea-spray vales a kraken's bastard plotted. But inside Winterfell's grey embrace, hope stirred anew, tinged with rose and wolf. The snow had not yet fallen. The rivers had not yet frozen. The heart trees' sap still pulsed. And in that fragile interlude, Robb Stark and Margaery Tyrell prepared to plant the first seed of unity, unsure if spring or storm would follow, but ready, at least, for dawn. Okay. Dawn came thin and gray as sword smoke, the sky the color of hammered lead. Winterfell stirred while most of its guests still lay buried under furs. Cooks hauled steaming cauldrons through mist, kennelmen quieted restless hounds, and ravens gossiped in the broken first keep. Amid that hush Robb Stark woke before the hearth in his solar heart, already drumming with the promise of vows. He lay a moment, listening to the castle breathe. Each creak and clatter familiar since boyhood, yet changed now by the knowledge that before another sunset, he would not merely rule here, but share rule. The thought was flint striking tinder. Sudden warmth, sudden fear. Grey wind sniffed at the door, then padded to the bedside, amber eyes bright in dimness. Robb scratched the direwolf's ruff. "A busy day for us both," he murmured. "See you keep the Septons from tripping over their robes." The wolf huffed, nipped his wrist, half challenge, half affection, and padded out again. Robb rose, shivering as the stone flags kissed bare feet. Outside the narrow window, red dawn teased the eastern ramparts. Somewhere beyond those wolves, Lady Margaery would be rising too, attended by handmaids, who spoke in soft Tyrell cadence, braiding her hair with threads of snow-white ribbon. In his mind he saw her at the heart tree last night, lantern light turning her eyes to pools of polished chestnut, the red leaf fluttering onto her cloak like fate's own seal. The memory steadied him. Armor awaited on the oaken chest beside the fireplace, breastplate freshly polished, greaves re-leathered, pauldrons repainted with direwolf sigils. Caitlyn's needlework wrapped the surcoat, grey wool trimmed in subtle green, a nod to the reach that many northern lords would notice and, he hoped, respect. He dressed without squires, wanting solitude. The metal felt heavier than usual, as if the vows themselves weighed upon the steel. When at last he laced his cloak, he paused before the smoky mirror, searching his own face for the boy who had once sparred with wooden swords in this very room. The boy was gone. Only a harder line remained at the jaw, a new stillness about the eyes. He lifted the sword from its stand. Ice's smaller cousin, for Ned's great blade lay silent in the crypts, and breathed. Time. Outside the solar Brynden Blackfish waited, helm beneath his arm. "Half the castle's up," he said in a low, gravel-soft voice. "Karstark men have quarrels with the Umbers over place in the procession, but I gave them something better to do. Guard duty on opposite towers." Robb managed a tight smile. No point to a wedding without feud to season it. "Just so. I've told Septon Chael will begin the Godswood rites at first bell. Then a septry blessing for any 7 folk who wish. Lastly the feast." The Blackfish's eyes narrowed. "Bolton's quiet this morning. Too quiet. He's not required to sing." Robb started down the stair. "Keep eye on him nonetheless." "Both eyes, nephew." In the lower yard he found it transformed. Banners along the palisade, rushes scattered fresh, braziers burning sweet pine. Winterfell small folk lined the walk in simple wool, curious and wary. Robb nodded to each cluster, noting pairs of hands clasped in sleeves against the chill. They carried no roses, nor lilies. Their token was endurance. If Margaery meant to be their queen, she must earn it here, among smoke and frost. A hush rolled across the yard. At the far gate, 3 Tyrell trumpeters lifted curved bronze. The first note cut the morning like bright wine. Robb turned as the procession appeared. Lady Margaery astride snowdrop, cloak of deep hunter green lined with silver fox, hair braided and pinned with pearl buds. Behind her rode Sir Loras in gilded armor reflecting pale sun, Lord Tarly austere, 20 reach knights arrayed in disciplined columns. Musicians followed on foot, harp strings and reed pipes weaving a measured, almost solemn prelude. Robb's pulse kicked. He stepped forward, gray wind beside him. As Margaery reached the midpoint, he raised a gloved hand. Her column halted with crisp precision. Boots crunched. She dismounted, unassisted, cloak billowing. For an instant, they simply regarded one another across an arm's length, a meeting of tides. Then Robb offered his forearm in the northern manner. She set her small gloved hand upon the crook of elbow, allowing him to lead through the gate arch into the godswood. The air under the red leaves was cooler, hushed as library vaults. Thin birch smoke drifted from copper braziers, placed to ward damp. Beneath the heart tree, the ground had been cleared of snow patches, carpets laid of woven straw and moss. Sept and Chael and 2 silent sisters of the faith waited near, but the heart tree itself was efficient here, as it had been for 10,000 years. Catelyn and Maester Luwin awaited within the silent circle, Bran in his wheeled chair. Rickon perched solemn, atop the chair's back rail, with Shaggy Dog curled likewise. Around them stood bannermen. The Great John, Lady Mage Mormont, Lord Glover, Galbart Glover, tall, angular Roose Bolton in grey fur, Rickard Karstark gaunt as winter famine. Off to one side stood Sir Brynden and a handful of riverlords. Every eye followed as Robb and Margaery stepped onto the straw. Robb released her and knelt before the white trunk. "I am Robb of House Stark," he said, voice strong. "I come before the gods to lay down my lone path and bind it to another." He touched palms to cold earth. Margaery knelt beside him, cloak sweeping. "I am Margaery of House Tyrell. I come freely, seeking bond with the North, seeking bond with your heart." Her voice rang soft yet clear. They clasped hands. The godswood seemed to breathe with them. A stir of leaves overhead, unseen wings alighting closer. Catelyn stepped forward bearing a silver cup filled from the hot spring. "Water drawn from Winterfell's secret depths," she declared. "Warm in the cold, ancient and constant." She offered first to Robb. He drank. Then to Margaery. She sipped, shivering. Catelyn poured the last of it into the roots. "Thus do we share warmth." Old Nan's voice, quavering but firm, rose from behind the assembly. "And thus do we see the winters through." It drew a ripple of smiles. Robb unsheathed his sword. Not ice. Too weighty, too bound to memories of judgment, but a serviceable longsword forged in White Harbor. He pricked his thumb, a bright bead welling. Margaery did the same with a small rose-handled dagger tucked at her hip. They pressed the 2 cuts together. Blood mingled. Bran's eyes widened, Rickon's too. Some thought it barbaric, others deeply sacred. A raven flapped from the higher branches and settled, croaking. Robb felt the hush deepen. He spoke the words rehearsed only with mother and maester. "I pledge my sword, my voice, my justice, and the long winters of my blood to you, Margaery, for as long as the stars wheel over Winterfell." She answered without tremor. "And I pledge my counsel, my bounty, my bloom, and the turning summers of my blood to you, Robb, for as long as the roots of this tree find the water beneath." A breeze rustled the red leaves. One leaf detached, spinning downward to land upon their joined hands. Gasps whispered. Robb squeezed her fingers. "Thus is it sealed," Catelyn announced, her voice nearly breaking. The ring she bore was Ned's, simple iron set with a sliver of polished weirwood. Robb slid it upon Margaery's finger. She in turn placed a band of chased grey gold upon his. The breeze stilled, as if satisfied. Sept and Chael cleared his throat and intoned a brief blessing of the 7 for those gathered of that faith. A compromise, No full sept ceremony, yet recognition of those southern gods. When he concluded, Margaery bowed her head. Robb rose, drawing her gently up. Applause crackled. The great Jon's booming whoop startled crows into the dawn. Back through the Godswood Arch, they walked as husband and wife. Direwolf and Rose, escorted now by mixed guard. Northern spears on one side, Reach knights on the other. Horns blared across the yard. Small folk tossed handfuls of pine needles and barley. There were no roses this far north. The makeshift confetti whirled like green snowflakes. The feast erupted the instant they entered the hall. Long trestles groaned under platters. Herb-stuffed hare, buttered beetroot, smoky river trout, honeyed parsnips, Highgarden pigeon pies, shipped half-baked and finished in Winterfell ovens. Mummers in borrowed coats jigged between benches. A quartet of Manderly singers attempted a Northman lament, while harpists from the Reach twisted it into livelier tapestry. Goblets clinked. Robb and Margaery sat at the high table, he at center, she at his right. To her right Catelyn presided, pale but smiling. To his left Lord Bolton quietly drank. At intervals, the blackfish prowled the steps, eyeing doorways, while Grey Wind sprawled on the dais behind chairs. Silent sentinel, with eyes half-lidded, until any commotion jolted them open. Early toasts came thick and quick. The great Jon roared a speech so exuberant half his words drowned in laughter. Lady Mage Mormont raised a flagon promising bear pelts for the new queen. Sir Loras offered a poet's tribute to courage meeting grace. Rickard Karstark's toast was grudging, muttered about Stark's ever strong. Roose Bolton merely inclined his head, pale lips curving faintly. Margaery met each with warmth, drawing even Karstark to an uneasy smile, by praising his son's valor at the Green Fork. Robb watched her maneuver with fascination. She spoke 5 tongues of courtesy, flatterer of proud men, balm to grieving mothers, spark for jaded knights, sister to shy squires, hand to old ladies who thought themselves invisible. If he had feared she might wilt, the fear dissolved like snow on forge iron. Midway through the second course, Arya slipped from behind a pillar, tugging at Robb's sleeve. She had returned from Bravos only 3 moons past, half wild, half water dancer. "Hot pie baked you a special," she said with mischievous grin. "He swears it's a direwolf, but you'll have to imagine the ears." Robb laughed and kissed her brow, relief washing him at the sight. For a moment, the war and the weight and the politics all blurred, leaving only siblings at a noisy feast. And yet politics crept. As the musicians shifted to a slow reel, Robb caught Roose Bolton leaning close to his new bride. Margaery listened, brow politely arched. When Bolton withdrew, she murmured something. He bowed ever so slightly, eyes pale and unblinking as a snake in winter. Later she relayed the exchange. "He reminds me leeches preserve life while drinking it," she said low, after Robb escorted her part way across the hall to greet Lord Glover's wife. "He offered congratulations and warned me northern winters flay away softness." Robb's jaw tightened. Bolton enjoys morbid wit. And still he seemed measuring. She sipped watered wine. "I will remember the weight of his glance. Keep Grey Wind near." Robb watched Bolton glide toward the exit, silent as shade. A hound's gaze may disquiet him in turn. The dance sets began. Margaery insisted on the first with her husband. Strings soared, and they circled before the head table, her skirts a swirl of green and silver, his cloak sweeping. Village girls sighed. Knights clapped rhythm. On the dais Catelyn held Bran's hand. The boy's eyes shimmered with delight. Even stoic Tyrell permitted a curl of mouth at the display. There followed a whirlwind of partners. Margaery danced with the great Jon, who nearly hoisted her clear off feet, with Sir Wendell Manderly, who sweated oceans, with Bran, for whom she knelt to spin his chair about, and finally with Rickon, small and fierce, who banged his wooden sword on her calf for tempo. Robb's turns were with Lady Mormont, formidable, Arya darting, and even by unexpected courtesy, Sir Loras, demonstrating a reach step said to mimic waves of lavender. The hall rang bright, heavy beams echoing the stamp of boots. Yet through cheer, a subtle tension threaded. Karstark men kept watchful eyes on Freys. Freys watched Bolton. Bolton watched everyone. Robb marked each glance like stray sparks near dry tinder. He saw Lord Walder's envoys whisper near a keg, heard mention of married thrice over and promises owed. He steered Margaery away. The third course came: boar and blackberry sauce, crusty oat loaves, wheels of goat cheese. Maester Lewin read a list of noble gifts: carved ash longbows from Deepwood Motte, blue sapphires from Tarth, 10 wagons of barley from White Harbor. Lord Tarley presented a master-crafted sword named Summer's Embrace, blade pattern welded with twisting silver and gold. Robb took it, testing balance. It sang, light yet true. Ellen of House Karstark, the only daughter, shyly handed Margaery gloves, sewn of direwolf hide lined with ermine. Rare gift indeed. The new queen thanked her with a promise to don them upon first ride. While gifts were displayed, Septon Chael beckoned Robb aside. A raven had arrived, seal broken, opened, likely, by Bolton before doubling to the Septon. It was from the twins. Lord Walder Frey summoned Robb and his queen for a blessing en route south to join Hoster Tully's funeral procession. Walder couched it in pleasantries, but the demand sang clear. Present your bride lest I deem myself dishonored. Robb's gut clenched. He had broken Frey betrothal when he married Jane Westerling, a mistake the Red Wedding had once loomed from in darker timelines. Now he had married again, though for alliance broader. Frey pride would smart. He shared the message with Catelyn and Margaery in a quiet corner behind weaving tapestries. Catelyn's face tightened. Walder's insult is almost ritual now. Ignore him too long and he lashes out. Margaery bit her lip, thinking. If we travel by sea from White Harbor, we bypass the twins entirely. She traced the map embroidered on tapestry. But his annoyance might grow. Robb nodded. Better to confront leeches before they swell. The question lingered unanswered. Feast must resume. They returned to dais, reopened hearths with louder music. The final toasts approached midnight. Sweet oatcakes drizzled in pine syrup circulated. Chairs scraped back, bodies sagged with wine. Robb rose, calling hush. You have honored our union with voice and laughter, he said, words ringing. Know that we shall strive to honor your faith in turn. Together we pledge that no winter, no Lannister, no hunger shall conquer the north or the Reach, or any good river between while breath yet fills our chests. Margaery stepped beside him, cheeks faintly flushed. Few things bloom in frost, so they say. Yet frost itself shapes beauty in crystal forms. May our kingdoms together forge such beauty, hard and bright, unmelting. A cheer rose, heartfelt. Even Bolton touched his cup rim to toast. When at last the hall emptied, torches guttering low, the newlywed pair exited through the covered walk to the Queen's Tower, restored and aired fresh for its first guests in decades. Trumpeters had long since laid down horns. Only hoot of an owl followed them across the yard. Their breath clouded. Inside, fires blazed in high hearths, pelts draped the bed. Robb barred the door while Margaery unfastened her cloak, admiring the chamber. Carved beams, window seat overlooking the godswood pools, table set with mulled wine. Silence settled, warm and promising. She turned to meet his gaze. I have studied maps of Winterfell, she whispered, stepping closer. Yet none showed me this. She touched his chest just over the heart, feeling thump under wool. He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing a stray ribbon of hair. This is not marked on my maps either. He smiled, hesitant. Shall we chart it together? Her answer was a kiss, soft yet assured. They moved like dancers once more, steps slower, purposeful, stripped of audience. Cloaks fell, boots thumped. He traced pale freckles at the nape of her neck. She felt scars on his shoulders he scarcely remembered earning. When they climbed beneath the firs, the chill fled, replaced by heat akin to forgefire and snapped pine. Outside, wind keened through battlements, an old song, but inside hearts beat a new rhythm. Far beneath, in Winterfell's crypts, the stone effigies of ancient kings in the north watched with carved wolf heads, stoic and silent. Perhaps the spirits rose invisible to stand sentinel, judging. Perhaps they nodded. By glass hour, moon high, they lay wrapped together. Margaery traced idle circles on his chest. "Tell me of the North's next peril," she murmured, half drowsy, "so I may plan gardens against it." Robb stared at rafters. Frey discontent ranks high. Lannister raids along our southernmost villages. And another, Stannis, driven from Blackwater yet unbowed, stirs in the snows near Eastwatch, hunting wildlings and red priests. But the peril I fear most lies within our own host. He thought of Bolton. Ambition in winter clothes. Then we watch within. Together. She lifted herself on elbow. I rose, sensed the air around it. Wolves smell danger. One warns, one bites. He kissed her knuckles. We make a fine pack. They drifted toward sleep as embers glowed, dreams mingling. Hers a maze of frozen roses opening to reveal warm green hollows. His a vision of long halls lined with banners half wolf, half rose, fluttering side by side beneath gentle falling snow. Their sleep was less restful for Grey Wind. The direwolf prowled outer corridor, hackles rising at intervals, as though he scented foe unseen. Twice he paused before the stair window, tail stiff, lips snarling silent. Snowflakes drifted beyond glass. Nothing moved below, yet the wolf felt wrongness carried on night currents. At first Moonbell Bolton men on late watch exchanged nods with a pair of reach guards patrolling the rampart walk. Candles flickered in arrow slits. Stews cooled. Somewhere in the library, a mouse scuttled across parchment. Quiet draped Winterfell, until a scream tore it. Robb jerked awake, sword half drawn before eyes opened. Margaery shot upright. The scream rose again. Thin, child-sharp. He flung on breeches, raced to door. Margaery close behind, clutching Robb. In the corridor, Bran's wheelchair rattled, pushed by a Tyrell guard. Arya sprinted barefoot, hair wild. "Rickon!" they cried. Rickon was found in the yard, shaggy dog bristling at shadows. The boy trembled but unharmed. He spoke of a man with candle eyes, who watched from the loft, then slipped like smoke when Wolf growled. Search parties scoured stable loft. Nothing but hay. No prints except dog and child. Robb's gut twisted. He recognized fear in his men's faces. To breach Winterfell so soon after wedding was insult layered on threat. "Double every wall post," he ordered, voice gravel. "Any man shirks, his pay goes to widow of the next man slain." Bolton's steward, to pinch sour woolies, offered to interrogate stable boys. Robb waved him off. Margaery knelt by Rickon, soothing. "Rose honey for courage," she told him, giving the sweet from robe pocket. The child sniffled, calmer. Hours later, Grey Wind still paced. Robb walked parapets until dawn, cloak flapping. South Rampart smelled faintly of singed torch, but there had been no torch fire. He knelt, fingers brushing stone. Oily residue smeared glove, lamp black, seldom used by Northmen. He pocketed cloth scrap, mind racing. One day, morning council met with overshadowed moods. Roose Bolton arrived last, claiming fever. His eyes, however, were lucid, too lucid. Robb placed the cloth on the table between maps. "Someone crept inside the stables," he said. "Foreign oil from a lantern, perhaps Bravosi make." "Not ours." Bolton examined with indifference. "Have you questioned the new guards, Your Grace? The Reach Lords bring many hands unknown to us." Lord Tarley bristled. "My men are drilled and loyal. Northern grievances often wear wolf heads." Karstark slammed fist. "Are you accusing Winterfell's own?" Robb raised hand. "Enough. We shall question both. Discretion, not accusation." He studied Bolton, glimpsed a flicker. Satisfaction? Hard to know. Bolton's gaze rarely betrayed. He dispatched the Blackfish to oversee inquiries, while he personally accompanied Bran and Rickon to training yard, turning morning into a lesson of confidence. Bows and arrows for the younger, spear drills for squires. Margaery watched from a low bench, gloved hands folded beneath white ermine. She conversed with Lady Mage about bear-fighting tactics. Arya sat beside, helping translate Northman idioms. By noon, a chill wind gusted from the east, bringing spatter of sleet. Winter's mouth at doorstep, though still autumn by calendar. Ravens circled low. One alighted by Robb with scroll-bound red. The seal, a mockingbird perched on coin. Littlefinger. Robb cracked wax. Inside, a terse message. Your reach bride travels unsafe ground. Wolves may guard, yet roses wither, unseen. Consider that King's Landing values strong alliances too. I remain, ever your humble observer of markets. No signature. The cryptic arrogance pricked him. He showed it to Margaery in the solar, as sleet peppered glass panes. Pater, she said, tasting the name like sour wine. He fancies himself midwife to every union, provided he is paid. This smacks of threat, disguised as concern. He orchestrated the ambush, I'm near certain. Then why warn now? Robb threw scroll into brazier. To unsettle. He plays at edges. Margaery leaned at window. We must answer not with fear, but vigilance. She turned. May I form a household guard from both north and reach. Women sworn to me, untainted by lord's scheming. He blinked. A woman's guard? Girls in mail might raise eyebrows. And lower daggers. Who looks twice at a laundress near council door, or a serving girl pouring wine? He considered. Choose whom you will. He stepped closer, lowered voice. But trust none fully, save perhaps Brienne. She placed palm on his chest. Nor you, save gray wind. Laughter alleviated tension. They embraced, sharing warmth against chill. And now. In coming days, Winterfell hummed like forge. Masons repaired breach in curtain wall. Carters unloaded reach barley into stone granaries. Blacksmiths re-riveted mail for 300 new recruits drawn by prospect of king and queen. Margaery walked ramparts each morning, cloak snapping, memorizing names of every sentry. She breakfasted in kitchens with scullions, learning gossip. She dined at midday with maesters, questioning war logistics. Word spread. The southern flower had thorns of inquiry. Robb convened war councils, planning spring campaigns should snow allow. Letters from White Harbor reported Lannister longships, harrying fishing towns along the Bight, their hulls tin-plated in false colors. He dispatched Lord Manderley's younger son with a squadron of northern longships, promising reach grain to feed displaced villagers. Karstark grievances flared anew when one of his nephews was caught brawling with a Tyrell archer over words about southern arrogance. Robb fined both units equal rations until snowmelt. Margaery suggested joint archery contest to bleed rivalry into sport. On the evening field, Karstark bows outshot Tyrell crossbows at distance, but Tyrells bested them at rapid volley. Wagers were paid, grudges softened. Wayne. Late one twilight, Catelyn found Margaery alone in the crypt tunnel entrance. Lamp held high, gaze lingering on carved likenesses. The cool air smelled of dust and chalk. A queen should not haunt the dead so soon, Catelyn chided gently. Margaery turned, eyes reflecting lamplight. I seek counsel from forebears. They speak through silence. Catelyn joined her, layers of shawls rustling. She regarded Ned's statue ahead, sword across lap. My lord husband did love silence, but not secrets. She folded arms. Many here will test you, child. They watch for cracks. I know. Margaery's shoulders straightened. Yet cracks let light through. Perhaps they will see I am not ice to be chipped, but soil to be tilled. Catelyn's mouth curved in grudging respect. Mind that fertile soil breeds weeds as well. Then I shall garden diligently. Margaery offered lamp. Catelyn declined. Together they walked back toward torchlit stair, two women of different worlds bound by shared desire. Protect their pack. As frost hardened ground, ravens carried ill news. King's Landing had levied new grain taxes, squeezing riverlands already starved by war. Across the sea, Sellsail captains swore Lannister envoys hired every spare galley for spring assault on White Harbor. In the Vale, Lysa Arryn died of mysterious fall, leaving Lord Baelish regent for the board. The realm teetered like a stool with legs of unequal length. Robb called council in the library. Scrolls cluttered table. ink pots crowding between tankards. Bolton's cool voice offered a solution. March quickly to seize Harrenhal, now Baelish's. Deny Lannisters the mid-river stronghold. Karstark agreed, lust for battle glinting. Tarly countered that such a push before winter would thin supply lines. Margaery listened, silent, until Robb asked her view. "We hold Winterfell and the Neck," she said. "Let our foes bleed coin shipping armies through Dorne and across narrow sea. Meanwhile we mend roads, fill cellars, and court the common folk. Bread wins longer wars than blades." Bolton's smile did not reach eyes. "Mercy misleads, your grace." "Mercy is not weakness," she answered, meeting his gaze until he looked away. "It is investment." Robb raised hand. Decision tabled until scouts returned from Moat Cailin. He sensed fracture lines. Bolton eager to split, Karstark thirsting for vengeance, Tarly cautious but proud, Glover resentful of home lost to Ironborn. Margaery's words built bridges, but some spanned chasms bottomless. That night, after council dismissed, Robb walked the still warm kitchens, seeking leftover pastry. He found Margaery there handing loaves to a washerwoman whose husband had fallen at Green Fork. They spoke quietly. Robb watched unseen a moment, heart tugged. When she sensed his presence, she smiled. "Flour on sleeve. One must taste dough to know bread," she said, shrugging. He kissed her forehead. "You bake alliances. Better than swords bake men." She sobered. "Your lords will resist anything that smells southern. Some. Others tire of iron." He traced her jaw. "We shall give them reason to tire more." The first true snow arrived at last, fat flakes drifting from iron clouds, lawn and rampart cloaked in hush. Children darted to catch flakes on tongues. Margaery stood on Queen Tower balcony, arms wrapped round fur collar, watching white cover courtyard. She had seen snow once upon the mountains near Horn Hill, distant patch that melted by noon. This was different, endless, quiet, tender. Robb approached from behind, setting his hands upon hers. "Does winter frighten you still?" She leaned back. "It humbles me. But no, not fright." She exhaled puff of white. "Teach me to ride through drifts." He laughed. "You'll curse the lesson." Yet 2 mornings later, they rode out along King's Road stub, hooves crunching. She wore thick leathers, Tyrell gloves lined with direwolf hide. Brienne led with a standard, followed by a cluster of mixed guards. Wind knifed cheeks, yet exhilarated. Margaery urged Snowdrop into gallop. Flakes stung her lashes, laughter spilled bright as sleigh bells. Robb chased, gray wind bounding ahead, until they reached a ridgeline overlooking a frozen tarn ringed by black spruce. They dismounted, breath steaming. There he taught her to skid stone across ice. She taught him to whistle a Tyrell shepherd's call that echoed off ridges. In that crystal stillness, marriage felt unburdened by banners. They talked of children, vague shapes yet, but names tumbled. Eddard, Lyanna, maybe a Lionel for her father. Dreams scribbled on snow. On return they found flurry of commotion. A rider from Riverrun had arrived. Hoster Tully's health failed fast, funeral near. Frey envoys pressed again for Robb's visit, hinting at withheld toll rights otherwise. Catelyn's face bore grief carved anew. Robb pledged to ride south with lean escort after New Year feast, leaving Margaery regent with counsel of Blackfish and Tarly. She insisted on traveling too. He refused. Roads unsafe, and her presence would anchor Winterfell. They argued gently that night by the hearth, embers low. "I am not decoration," she stated, "nor hostage to hold your stead. You are my queen. Queens secure realm while kings wage war." She touched his cheek. "Then return swiftly, or I will march south myself with half the bakers and milkmaids to fetch you." He smiled, and the tension broke. Yet both felt the looming parting weight heavier than cloaks. Elsewhere, wheels of fate ground. In Harrenhal Baelish plotted letters to Frey and Bolton both. Offer and counter-offer. In King's Landing Queen Cersei celebrated Joffrey's name day with executions of 4 street mummers, who mocked her hair, Rumor said she soon would wed the young king to some associate princess in hopes of trade fleets. In the Stormlands, the Red Woman Melisandre foretold dark wings, dark words, king's blood spilled on wedding bed. Snow thickened across the realm, but beneath it, seeds of violence waited. Yiwand. On the eve of New Year feast, Robb and Margaery stood once more in Godswood. Snow-blanketed branches, heart trees' red leaves stark against white. They wore heavy cloaks, breath plumed. Robb folded a letter to Bran's tutor, sealing with wolf and rose. If Harrenhal falls, we cut their middle, force the lion to crawl. Margaery placed hand atop his parchment. If Frey welcomes you all as well. If he plots, we must outwit them. Robb recalled tales of the Red Wedding that never was in this timeline, only in the realm of nightmares, yet possible as any turn. I will ride alert, he promised. He drew her to him, snowflakes catching in her lashes. Guard our hearth. I guard more than hearth, she whispered. I guard hope. Their kiss tasted of cold and wood smoke. Above them, a raven cawed, dislodging snow from branch. Flakes cascaded around their heads. Silent benediction or omen. Indanda. Niwa. Feast exploded with boisterous cheer. Wild boar, creamed leeks, barley cakes shaped like suns, barrels of dark stout tapped by Manderley brewers. Minstrels played both northern drum and Highgarden flute, strangely harmonic. Robb opened dancing with aria this time, while Margaery spun Bran in wheeled circles. Guests marveled a union apparently strong. Yet behind draperies whispers crawled. Bolton men muttering of pink letters from Dreadfort. Tyrell squires gambling away silvers to Frey envoys. A Myrish knife found under Karstark cushion. The Blackfish quietly seized 3 strangers near kennels. They carried no house colors, only tithe scars on palms, likely sellswords. The strangers vanished into Godswood cells, never seen again. At feasts waning, Robb addressed Hall. At first thaw, I ride south to pay respects to Lord Hoster Tully and parley with Lord Walder. Queen Margaery shall rule in council. I charge each of you, treat her word as mine. Cheers answered, but measured. Bolton's eyes glittered. Later, as torches dimmed, Robb and Margaery stole away through service passage to top of Broken Tower. Stars shone between scudding clouds. Aurora rippled faint green. They clasped hands, silent. Wind tugged cloaks, braids. Words felt frail against night's immensity, so they spoke none, letting hearts converse in quiet beats. When at last they descended and parted for rest, Robb felt weight of upcoming journey press like mail soaked in sleet. But he also carried warmth. Her presence within walls, her cunning, her steadiness. Whatever trap Frey laid, whatever knife Bolton honed, Robb believed their unity would matter. He whispered a wolf's prayer for endurance. Yeah. Hours before dawn, drums of alarm erupted. Torches flared across ward. Robb burst from bed, sword drawn. Outside, a column of smoke billowed from granary roof. Fire. Margaery arrived, hair unbound, flanked by Brienne. Together, they led bucket lines. Snow hampered flames yet fed steam. Sparks leapt to timber beams. Robb scaled ladder, hacking burning rafters, gray wind darting amid chaos. They doused by sunrise, but store lost half stock of Reach grain. Investigation found oil-soaked rags stuffed into grain sacks. Sabotage. Tracks in snow led to armory door, then vanished. 2 guards missing, both newly hired from White Harbor, now bodies discovered in well, throats cut. Murderer still among them. Robb's fury ran ice cold. He convened summary tribunal, questioning watchers, searching quarters. Bolton offered to torture suspects. Robb refused. I'll not have flaying in Winterfell. Bolton bowed, but his eyes promised memory. Margaery surveyed ruined granary with measured calm. She ordered salvage of half-burnt barley into mash for pig feed, not waste. She drafted letters to Highgarden for more grain, to White Harbor for sea shipment before ports iced. Her poise steadied servants' trembling hearts. That evening Robb found her kneeling among charred rafters, selecting bits of sound oak. For what? he asked. A cradle. She looked up, soot-streaking cheek. One day, his throat tightened. He knelt, helped gather. Snowflakes drifted onto blackened wood. Ah. The day of departure dawned stark blue. Robb's party numbered 100. Personal guard, Karstark outriders, 6 Tyrell knights, Maester Luwin for letters. Catelyn remained, Bran and Rickon as well. Before gate Robb embraced his mother. She clung longer than protocol, whispering, "Trust heart, not ears." He hugged brothers, jested with Arya to mind her water dance practice. Then he faced Margaery. Words eluded. He pressed a kiss to her gloved knuckles. She drew him close, breath warm at ear. "Return, my wolf, or I will set this north ablaze with roses till you do." He laughed, half choking. They parted, eyes locked until distance blurred shapes. Snow dusted his cloak as columns trotted down King's Road. On rampart Margaery watched till banners vanished. Brienne stood behind like living tower. "We guard hope," she said softly. Brienne nodded. But hope wore thin when ravens that week brought no word. Margaery kept busy, oversaw rebuilding granary, held court for tenant disputes, hosted winter singer competitions. Yet each dusk she climbed Queen Tower, scanning horizon for returning outriders. None came. Deep within night's hush, whispers traveled spiral stairs. Frey cruelty, river swollen, trap sprung. Catelyn paced library, candle trembling. Blackfish drilled men late into dark. Bolton smiled too often. Snow fell relentless, sealing roads. Wolves howled beyond walls, their voices carried on icy air like lamentations. And one evening, as Margaery stood alone within Godswood, a raven landed on the heart tree root. Its eyes gleamed candle bright. Around its leg, black ribbon, no seal. She untied, unfolded. 4 words only, scrawled in dried brown. "King in chains. Twins." Her breath caught, plume of white. Around her snowflakes spun. She read again, pulse roaring. Then she straightened, fingers clenching parchment till edges tore. "Brienne," she called, voice ringing beneath bleeding leaves. Footsteps thundered into clearing. Margaery pressed message into night's gauntlet. "Ready horses, we ride by dawn." Brienne's eyes widened. Through snow-choked passes, the king ordered. He is king no longer, if chains truly bind. She lifted chin. "We cut them." Moonlight glimmered on her eyes, no longer spring brown but hard as iced branch. Snow fell thicker, each flake a silent drumbeat counting hours to rescue. In the heart trees, face the carved mouth seemed to twist. Whether in warning or assent, she could not tell. She turned away, cloak swirling like green promise against winter's pall. Behind her the raven croaked once and flew into darkness. Eika. Snow blanketed the world by morning, swallowing sound and blurring the hard edges of the bailey, the walls, the wild trees beyond. At first light, Winterfell's great yard was an icy hush, broken only by the shouts of the grooms and the scraping of iron-shod hooves on stone as the queen's party made ready. Margaery had not slept. She moved with that peculiar briskness of the sleepless, her gestures sharp as a sword's point. Brienne found her in the armory, donning a boiled leather vest beneath her woolen cloak, fingers steady as she buckled a dagger to her belt. "I've made arrangements," Brienne said, voice pitched low. 3 of your guards and 6 Northmen, who swore to your husband. The Blackfish is readying a fast sledge for the snow, with horses in harness." Margaery nodded, a flicker of gratitude passing her face. "See that Arya is told nothing, not until we are gone. She will find out, sooner or later. The girl has ears in every shadow." Brienne hesitated. "Lady Catelyn wishes to ride with us." Margaery's jaw set. "If she is willing, she comes. This is her son's battle more than mine. Ready food, torches, spare furs, and enough coin to buy every ferryman between here and the Twin if it comes to that." They stepped from the armory into the cold, breath pluming white, the keep stirring now behind shuttered windows. The Blackfish waited by the gates, face grim, sword strapped across his back, steel gray as the snow. Beside him, Catelyn Stark wore a battered cloak, and the hard expression of a woman who had buried too many children to flinch at risk. She met Margaery's gaze and nodded once. Solidarity. Steel. There was no announcement, no fanfare, only the low thunder of hooves on packed snow and the dull creak of the sledge runners as they set out through the postern gate. The sky was a pale haze overhead, promising more snow. The road south was little more than two muddy ruts between skeletal trees, the blizzard swirling to fill their tracks. Their progress was slow, the snowdrifts deep, but the urgency in the Queen's heart kept their pace unyielding. Each mile was a test. The sledge lurched and groaned over buried roots, horses blowing hard, and the wind clawed at faces and hands. Margaery rode hunched, the Tyrell rose at her throat, lost under frost and grit. She asked questions as they went. The disposition of the Freys, the state of the fords, the loyalty of the lesser river lords. Blackfish answered in curt syllables. Catelyn supplied the histories, the hurts, the betrayals. It was a litany of old wounds and newer ones, of debts and dead men's oaths. By midday they passed the burned shell of a sept, smoke drifting from the ruins. Brienne rode ahead to scout the road, sword drawn. They pressed on without pause. Behind them the world vanished into white silence. Only the crows followed. The second night fell hard and quick, the camp thrown up beneath the shelter of a windbreak. Old stones, a cairn for some forgotten lord. The men ate in silence, bread frozen hard, venison sliced thin from a frozen haunch. The Blackfish kept watch, pacing a slow circuit, eyes ever on the horizon. Catelyn and Margaery spoke little. When sleep came, it was shallow, punctuated by the howl of wolves and the shuddering of the horses. On the third day, Brienne returned from the van at a gallop, snow caked in her hair. Tracks ahead. Heavy, 24 men, armed. They are waiting at the next ford. Frey men? Catelyn asked, rising. They carry no banners. Their boots are too new for bandits, and their eyes too hungry. Then we go around, Margaery said. There is an old shepherd's path to the east if the Blackfish remembers it. He did. They veered off the road, plunging into the deeper woods. Branches whipped faces, tore at cloaks. The horses struggled, the sledge nearly overturned twice, but none complained. At dusk, the lights of a farmstead glimmered between the trees. The farmer barred the door at first, but a purse heavy with Highgarden silver opened it. They slept on straw, grateful for warmth, and rode out before the sun. It was the morning of the fifth day when they crested a rise and the twins loomed before them, ugly as ever, hunched above the white churn of the river. The towers bristled with men, torches burning at every parapet, the gates shut tight. Banners snapped from the ramparts. Frey blue and gray, the silver twin towers. No Stark wolf, no Tyrell rose. Only the Freys, the masters of the crossing, the keepers of grudges. They halted within bowshot, the horses blowing, the sledge creaking as it came to a stop. Brienne raised a hand, and the men drew close about the Queen and Lady Stark. Blackfish rode forward with a white flag, voice ringing clear. By rights of hospitality and the laws of the river, we demand entry. The Lady of Winterfell and the Queen of the North come under peace. There was a long silence. Then, above the battlements, a figure stepped into view, tall, stoop-shouldered, wrapped in a fur cloak. Lord Walder Frey, ancient and sharp-eyed as ever, glared down at them, flanked by sons and grandsons. So the North remembers after all, he cackled, voice thin as a blade. And the South sends its brightest bloom. What business have you here, Queenling? Then, my lord, Margaery called, voice strong despite the cold. I come for my husband. I come for the king in the north. Frey's eyes glimmered. Your king is my guest, as are all men who cross my bridge, but guests must pay, in coin or in kindness. And some debts weigh heavier than gold. He gestured. The gates creaked open a slit, enough for a single rider. Send the queen, alone, unarmed. If she would see her husband's face, let her walk where others have crawled. The Blackfish swore, but Margaery was already dismounting. She handed her sword to Brienne, squared her shoulders, and stepped toward the gate. Every gaze followed her. Her own guards tense, Frey bowmen leering, Catelyn's face tight with fear. The wind caught her cloak and set the silver fox lining flying, a flag of defiance. The portcullis rose with a shriek of chains, and she entered the shadow of the gatehouse. Within, the stone walls seemed to press in from all sides, the air stale and damp. Guards in Frey blue watched her with narrow eyes as she crossed the yard. Walder Frey waited in the great hall, hunched on his high-backed chair, hands folded like a spider at the heart of its web. "So the roses come north to bleed," he said, lips curling in a sneer. "Take her to the king." Guards led her down winding stairs, through halls that stank of old meat and older secrets. They halted before a heavy door, and the captain fumbled with a ring of keys. When the door swung wide, Margaery stepped inside and found Robb stark shackled to the wall. Gaunt but unbroken, hair tangled, face unshaven. His eyes widened as she entered. "Margaery?" His voice was raw, disbelief warring with hope. "How?" She crossed the cell, dropping to her knees before him. Her hands trembled as she cupped his face, searching for wounds, for fever. "We came. We are here. Are you harmed?" "I am not broken," he said. "But the phrase." "They have not won," she cut in fiercely. "Not while I stand." The guards watched, faces unreadable. One shifted, murmured a warning. But neither Robb nor Margaery looked away from each other. She pressed her forehead to his, breath ragged. "You must hold a little longer. The Blackfish is here. Brienne. Your mother. We have coin men, friends in the camps along the river. I will not leave you in chains." "Now!" A shout echoed from above. The sharp call of a horn, the clangor of steel on steel. Margaery whirled, reaching for a dagger she no longer had. The door slammed shut behind them. Robb strained against his chains, jaw clenched. "Listen," he said. "They said they would not kill me while my mother lived. But Walder hates the North. And the Lannisters sent him gold. He wants to see us beg, Margaery. He wants to break us. I will not beg." She found a loose stone, tested it in her palm. "If I must die here, it will not be quietly." Above, the shouting grew louder. The Blackfish had moved, that much she knew. Catelyn would be in danger. Every heartbeat pounded with the question. Had they come too late? Was this a trap they had galloped into, blind with love? There were footsteps in the hall, many, quick. The door banged open. Brienne's silhouette filled the doorway, sword red with blood, eyes wild. "Come, quickly." Margaery darted to the wall, hands fumbling at Robb's chains. Brienne produced a ring of keys, tried one after the next. Metal scraped, a link broke. At last, the chains fell, and Robb staggered, supporting himself on Brienne's arm. "Go," Brienne said. They've turned on each other above. Blackfish led half the guards off. But the Freys are gathering. We need to reach the gate. They hurried, Robb limping, Margaery clutching his arm. At the stairs, 2 Frey guards barred the way. Brienne met them blade to blade, her sword sweeping, bloodying the stone. Robb grabbed a fallen spear, used it as a staff. They gained the yard, snow swirling in from the open gate. The sledge waited beyond, horses stamping, Blackfish holding the reins, Catelyn clutching a crossbow. "Run," he called. Behind, the Freys surged from the hall, bows raised. Arrows flew, thudding into the yard. Margaery ducked as Brienne shielded her, the great knight's cloak flaring. Robb helped Margaery up onto the sledge, Brienne swinging on behind them. Blackfish cracked the whip, the horses bolted. Arrows whined past, one striking the back of the sledge with a thud. Another clipped Brienne's shoulder, blood spraying. Catelyn fired the crossbow back, the quarrel vanishing into the melee. The world became a blur of snow and shouts. Hooves churning ice, Blackfish cursing. They made the far bank, Freys in pursuit. It was Arya who saved them, appearing from nowhere astride a stolen horse, slinging stones from a leather pouch, her aim deadly. 2 Frey riders fell, The others drew up, startled by the wolf girl's wild cry. "This way!" she screamed, and the sledge veered off the main road into a thicket. Area riding point, the party crashing through brambles and across the frozen shallows. The pursuit faltered as the sledge vanished into the woods. Night closed in, the world a tangle of shadow and cold. At last, when breath was nearly spent and Robb nearly fainted, they drew up beneath a stand of ancient pines. There, hidden by snow and darkness, they caught their breath. Catelyn knelt by her son, tears freezing on her cheeks as she kissed his brow. Brienne bound her wound, gritting her teeth. Arya grinned like a wolf, wild-eyed with triumph. Margaery wrapped Robb in furs, holding him close. "We have won a battle," Blackfish said, voice low. "Not the war." Margaery nodded, eyes fierce in the gloom. "But we will win the war too. For the North. For the Pack. For hope." Nanim. That night, the wind howled through the trees, but within the circle of fugitives there was warmth. The warmth of family, of vows kept, of chains broken. Robb slept at last, head pillowed in Margaery's lap, as she watched the night for enemies and for the promise of dawn. The journey home was a nightmare of ice and hunger, but they pressed on, north always north, avoiding roads, trusting to Arya's sense for the wild, Brienne's sword, and the Blackfish's knowledge of hidden paths. Frey riders hunted them, but never found them. In the end, the storm proved their greatest ally, burying their tracks, masking their passage. They reached Winterfell thin and battered, but alive. There, before the gates, the people gathered, small folk and soldiers, maesters and bannermen. The word went out, spreading from hearth to hearth. The king had returned, rescued by his queen. Margaery stood on the steps of the great hall, Robb's hand in hers, the direwolf at their feet. Catelyn beside them, Arya and Bran and Rickon close by. Robb spoke, his voice hoarse but strong, to the crowd below. "The North endures. The Pack survives. Let all who would threaten us know, we are not broken. We are united. And as long as Wolf and Rose stand together, winter itself will not conquer us." The roar of the crowd was thunder and the howling of wolves. Inside, later, in the warmth of their private chambers, Robb and Margaery sat close before the fire. She tended his wounds, her hands gentle, her eyes troubled. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "The cold, the danger, the chains." She shook her head. "I regret nothing, Robb Stark. We are one. If you are chained, so am I. If you are king, I am queen. I will ride into fire for you. And I know, if it were me in the dark, you would do the same." Then, he drew her into his arms, voice rough. "I would burn the world to ashes for you." She smiled, a little sad, a little fierce. "Then let us build a better world instead." They sat in silence, firelight flickering across their faces, the warmth of hope and love and victory curling around them like another layer of furs. Winter was not ended. Enemies circled still, Frey and Lannister, Bolton and Baelish, even the ghosts of the past. But in Winterfell, the North was united, the king and queen together. And beyond the falling snow, somewhere, the first green shoots of spring waited, dreaming beneath the ice. Weeks passed as the world thawed by inches. The snow, that had been their savior in flight, now melted to treacherous ice, making the roads rivers of mud and the woods a silent maze of dripping branches. The wolves howled less at night. Crows ventured farther from the trees, pecking at the first black earth that showed beneath the pale shroud. In Winterfell, every hearth was stoked, every store counted and recounted, and the banners of Wolf and Rose hung together in the hall for all to see. In those first days of return, Robb Stark was more legend than king. Word had raced ahead of him by a dozen riders and 100 rumors. Some said he had escaped on wings, others that he'd killed Walder Frey with his bare hands. Most believed what mattered. Their king had been stolen by treachery and brought back by the iron will of his queen, the mother wolf and the youngest wildling girl the North had ever claimed. The small folk left offerings, candles for the gods, a hard-won bottle of mead, baskets of root vegetables, and dried fruit at the gates. Their king and queen had lived, so perhaps their sons might live too. Robb's wounds were slow to heal. The frays had not starved him, but chains bit deeper than hunger, and sleep came poorly. Some nights he would wake breathless, knuckles white against the furs. Margaery pressed close, her warmth and the scent of rosewater in her hair, the only shield against the memory of cold stone and iron. When sleep eluded him altogether, he walked the battlements with gray wind, the wolf's shadow a silent promise that he would not be taken unawares again. Margaery was everywhere, as tireless as the first spring wind. She rode out each morning to oversee the rebuilding of the burned granary, her guards a mixture of Tyrell men and hand-picked Northmen sworn to her personally. She inspected cellars, sampled porridge with the kitchen maids, sat in on disputes over spring planting, and stood with the stone masons as they shored up a breach in the outer wall. Where she walked, people followed, curious at first, then relieved to find the southern rose neither fragile nor vain. She learned their names, remembered their woes, and, when she spoke, promised not gold or miracles but effort, fairness, and a seat at the long table for every hungry mouth. Word spread quickly, as word always did, and the suspicion that greeted her arrival as queen gave way to a cautious pride. Arya, boldest of all, ranged farther than any. She had not returned with the others, but spent 2 more weeks slipping through the woods and villages along the Green Fork, sowing chaos. At one burned village, she found a clutch of Frey men extorting a miller for grain, and drove them off with stones and a knife. At another, she slept in a barn, dreaming wolf dreams, waking with straw in her hair and the taste of blood in her mouth. When at last she rode into Winterfell on a piebald horse, dirty and grinning, she was hailed as the Wolf Girl, the one who brought the king back. Robb embraced her as he would a prodigal ghost, but Margaery simply laughed and said, "You are as welcome as spring after a long winter, Arya Stark." Catelyn, too, changed with the return. She moved as if years had fallen from her shoulders, her eyes less haunted by loss, her voice firmer as she presided over council and court. She watched Margaery closely, sometimes with worry, sometimes with approval, and advised her as she might a daughter, quietly but without softness. Together they debated the coming challenges: how to feed a swelling population of refugees, how to keep Bolton men from stirring old feuds, how to mend fences with the Riverlords without bending the knee to Frey or Lannister. The old pain of Ned's loss, of all the deaths that had followed, was not gone, but it was joined now by something else. Hope, stubborn and unexpected, like the crocuses that pierced the last crust of ice in the godswood. One night, when the moon was new, and the stars sharp and cold, the lords and ladies of Winterfell gathered in the great hall for a council that lasted long into the darkness. Robb sat at the head of the table, Margaery to his right, Catelyn at his left. The Blackfish, his face still creased with worry, brought news from the Trident. Lannister riders had been seen near Fairmarket, while Baelish had seized yet more lands in the chaos. Lord Glover and Lady Mormont reported on the North's readiness, axes sharp, shields mended, men hungry but loyal. Sir Loras Tyrell, now formally attached to Margaery's household, had been drilling Northmen in the Tyrell method of cavalry maneuver, with mixed results. Brienne of Tarth stood silent sentinel behind Margaery's chair, her blue eyes ever watchful. The disputes were endless. Karstark pride, Bolton's subtlety, the ever-shifting allegiances of minor houses who saw the tides turning, but had not yet chosen a shore. At last, after much debate, Robb spoke. His voice was quiet, but cut through the clamor like a blade. "We will not answer Frey treachery with vengeance. Not yet. The North needs to heal. We need bread and peace, and every able man or woman who can hold a tool or a spear. Let the lions and the Freys tear at each other while we strengthen what is ours." Some objected, Rickard Karstark most fiercely, but Margaery met each challenge with calm reason. Vengeance serves pride. Harvest serves all. If we cannot feed our own, What does it matter whose banners fly over the ruins? That silenced even Karstark for a moment. Later, when the council dispersed, Robb and Margaery remained by the embers of the great hearth, her head on his shoulder, the weight of the realm pressing against their closeness. He spoke of his fears, of Frey and Lannister, of Bolton's unreadable smiles, of the possibility that the realm would tear itself apart no matter what he did. Margaery listened, fingers entwined with his, and when he was finished, she said softly, "You do not have to save the world alone, Robb. Let your people help you. Let me help you. You are not your father nor your mother. You are yourself. And I love you for that." Then he smiled, the lines at his mouth deepening, and for a moment he was younger, freer. In the days that followed, the snows melted in earnest, rivers ran fat and brown, and the smell of wet earth and green things rose above the walls of Winterfell. With spring came messengers from the Reach, bearing news and more than a little gold. Mace Tyrell, ever eager for glory, had repelled a Lannister incursion at Golden Grove, securing the Mander Valley for the harvest to come. Word from King's Landing was more troubling. Queen Cersei had survived another assassination attempt, this time blamed on an impertinent Dornish lord, and now the city was a nest of suspicion and spies. Some said that Joffrey planned to take a new queen from the free cities. Others that he'd set a price on Robb Stark's head that would bankrupt half the merchants of the capital. The North was not idle. Every day, Margaery's handmaidens and Brienne's chosen women drilled with spear and bow in the yard. "A queen's guard for a queen," Margaery said, and the small folk laughed. But soon the idea spread. Why should only men bear arms when the enemy would spare no one? When Arya was seen leading a knot of girls in sling practice, striking down crows from the battlements, even the old grumblers of the Watch had to admit the times were changing. Robb's counsels took on a new tenor as the weeks passed. Lords who had once sniped and snarled now vied to prove their loyalty. Glover boasted of his axes, Manderly of his ships, even the taciturn Serwyn sent new recruits to the guard. But it was the small folk who most surprised the Southron queen. Each day a new child pressed a bundle of dried flowers or a wooden token into her hand, and Margaery made sure each gift found a place at her table or her hearth. The threat of Frey retribution lingered, a cold shadow. Scouts returned with grim tidings. The twins were a fortress, every gate barred, every arrow slit manned. Rumors of poisoned wells and vanished travelers filtered up from the neck. No one doubted that Walder Frey plotted. But Margaery was patient. She sent letters to Highgarden, White Harbor, even Dorne, and slowly new alliances blossomed. Old rivals saw opportunity. If not for peace, then for profit. Gold bought silence. Food bought goodwill. And where gold and food could not reach, promises of justice or vengeance proved persuasive. It was in late spring, with the rivers clear and the woods thick with new green, that a rider came from the east, his horse lathered and his cloak torn. He bore the badge of House Reed, and his face was streaked with mud and terror. He was led into the great hall before Robb and Margaery, where he collapsed to one knee. "My lord, my lady, there are men in the marshes, not Freys, not Lannisters. They ride under no banners, but their swords are good steel. The Crannogmen watch, but they cannot match such numbers. They seek a path through the neck." The council gathered, lords bristling. Catelyn's face was grave. If the neck falls, so does the north. Robb was on his feet, summoning riders and ravens. But Margaery only nodded, eyes narrowing in thought. Who profits from chaos? Not the Freys. They fear us too much, and their bridges are too closely watched. Not the Lannisters, for their power is stretched thin. Baelish, perhaps, or the Golden Company, come at last to claim the debts of old kings. Val was a misty. Arya, perched on a windowsill, grinned. If they come by land, they bleed in the bog. Let them try. Plans were laid quickly. Robb sent Glover and Mormont with their swiftest, hardest men to the marshes, along with a handful of Tyrell archers and half a dozen of Margaery's new guard. The rest of the lords were kept close, holding Winterfell and the roads north. Sentries doubled. ravens sent to every bannerman. Still, each night brought the hush of worry. What if the bogmen fell? What if the invaders found the secret paths? As the tension grew, Margaery and Catelyn walked the battlements together, speaking little but seeing much. They watched the drills, the repairs, the daily routines of Winterfell's people. At dusk, as the sky burned purple and gold, Catelyn turned to her queen. "You are more north than south now, Margaery. The people trust you. The lords, some fear you. That is no small power." Margaery met her gaze, eyes weary. "I do not want them to fear me. Only to follow, if I must lead them. Fear is a tool, not a goal," Catelyn said quietly. "Remember that, when the time comes." It came sooner than either expected. 2 weeks after the Reed messenger, another rider galloped into the yard. Blood on his cloak, eyes wild. "The invaders are through. The marshes burn. Glover is fighting at the tall pines. They mean to split the realm in two." Robb was in the yard within moments, Margaery at his side, Brienne strapping on armor. The hall exploded into noise, lords shouting orders, men racing for horses, the scent of smoke on the wind. Robb mounted, grey wind at his stirrup. "Hold Winterfell," he told Margaery. "If they break us in the neck, the rest will come for you." She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak. As he rode out, she stood at the gates, head high, watching her king disappear into the blur of hooves and banners. The walls around her felt colder, but her will was steel. Inside, the hall became a fortress. Catelyn took command of the household guard, Arya vanished to gather her pack of wild girls, and Margaery donned her armor, every piece buckled tight. She moved among the people, speaking quietly, setting tasks, boiling oil for the walls, bread for the wounded, safe places for the children. The Tyrell guards stood with the Northmen, ready for whatever storm might come. The days blurred into one another, each marked by the clangor of distant battle and the nervous tension within the keep. Ravens came and went, bearing tidings. Glover's stand, Mormont's counterattack, wild fires in the bogs. Margaery barely slept, living on bread and strong tea, her voice hoarse from shouting, her heart aching with fear for Robb and the men. On the 4th day, the first wounded arrived. Northmen on makeshift litters, Tyrell archers limping, a Mormont woman with her sword arm bandaged tight. Margaery moved among them, giving water and comfort, hearing their stories. The invaders were clever, but the bogs were not easily tamed. And then, a rumor, the enemy had split, one force heading north, the other doubling back toward the twins. Catelyn was everywhere, grim and unbowed. She oversaw the wounded, stood watch on the walls, and at night sat by Margaery's side, her presence a steady anchor. At dusk on the 6th day, with the smell of smoke thick in the air, a horn sounded at the gates. The Blackfish rode in, face streaked with blood and grime, eyes burning. He knelt before Margaery, voice rawed. "The neck holds. Glover lives. The invaders are broken, scattered. Robb, your king comes behind, but he is wounded, a spear in the side. Not mortal, but deep." Margaery did not wait for permission. She ran to the gate, Brienne at her side, and watched as Robb rode in, grey with pain, grey wind snapping at the heels of the last straggling foe. The yard erupted. Shouts, sobs, laughter, the press of men and women and children. Robb dismounted slowly, leaning on Glover's arm. But his eyes found Margaery's first and held. She helped him to his chambers, stripping his armor with hands that shook, bathing the wound herself. The maester came, stitched and bandaged, shook his head in admiration at the king's stamina. But it was Margaery who sat by Robb's side until the fever broke, who pressed cool cloths to his brow and whispered promises in his ear. "You are too stubborn to die, Robb Stark. The North needs you. I need you." When at last he slept, she sat beside him, her head bowed, the weight of survival settling on her shoulders. Outside, Winterfell celebrated. Fires burned in every hearth. Songs rose into the starry sky, and the banners of Wolf and Rose snapped side by side in the freshening wind. In the days that followed, news of the victory and the neck. spread as fast as the spring thaw. The people rejoiced, and even the most dour lords found cause for cheer. Old enmities eased, at least for a time. With Robb healing, Margaery took the reins of rule, holding council each morning, receiving envoys, making judgment with a steady hand. Catelyn watched, pride mingling with something softer. It was Arya who said it first, voice proud and wild. "You are the heart of the pack, Margaery. You brought Robb home. You kept us safe." Margaery laughed, eyes bright with gratitude and exhaustion. "No, Arya, I am just a rose in a field of wolves." But the people of Winterfell began to believe otherwise. The summer that followed was brief but bright. Fields flourished, the first harvest rich and sweet, the storehouses fuller than anyone remembered. The Freys sulked behind their walls. The Lannisters howled but could not breach the neck. Ravens brought tidings of trouble from the south, but in the north, hope grew. Slow, stubborn, rooted deep. At midsummer, in the God's Wood, Robb and Margaery knelt before the heart tree, hand in hand, and spoke new vows. Private, unwitnessed, save by the old gods and the whisper of leaves. "I am yours," Robb said, voice thick with feeling. "Now and always. King or exile, wolf or man." Margaery smiled, her lips trembling. "And I am yours, Robb Stark. Through winter, through war, through every sorrow and every spring." When they rose, the sunlight caught the weirwood leaves and set them burning red and gold, the promise of autumn, the hope of another harvest. And in the quiet that followed, the North endured, united, its heart beating strong beneath banners of wolf and rose, ready for whatever storm might come. Ka-A. In the high summer, when the sun seemed to hang above Winterfell's towers longer each day, and the fields shimmered with promise, a rare peace settled over the north. Every courtyard stone, every bent head in the fields, every burst of laughter from the Godswood children, bespoke a world rebuilding itself, stitch by careful stitch. Robb's wounds faded to pale scars, reminders of a war not yet finished, but momentarily held at bay. Margaery's presence was as constant as the new warmth. She moved among the people as one of their own, all southern Polish dulled to a hard, bright core by winter's touch. In those days, the castle became a place of industry and hope. Scribes in the library compiled new records, tax rolls, pledges of grain, contracts sworn between wolf and rose. Maester Lewin was everywhere at once, orchestrating the movement of supplies, settling land disputes, training young pages to keep new accounts. Lords from distant holdings began to trickle in with their retinues, driven by curiosity and caution both. They wanted to see if the North had truly become more than just wolves, if the Tyrell rose, that southern bloom, could flourish in such hard soil. Margaery greeted each with warmth and dignity. For House Tallheart she hosted a feast of lake fish and barley. For House Serwyn she rode out with their lady on a tour of the newly replanted southern fields. There were soft moments as well. In the twilight hours, she might walk the wall with Arya, discussing archery and river fords, or slip away with Sansa, newly returned under quiet escort from the Vale, to tend the old god's garden beds, where Sansa's hands, like her mother's, coaxed beauty from cold ground. But shadows lingered, even under the gold sun. Roose Bolton sent fewer reports each month, and those that came were heavy with half-truths and silences. The Blackfish returned from a scouting expedition along the White Knife, reporting banners he did not recognize and merchants gone missing. "Something stirs in the east," he warned Robb over late-night ale. "If it's Lannister gold or Sellsword steel, I cannot say. But the Dreadfort's walls have grown higher." Robb's response was swift. More scouts, more riders on the eastern border, and careful private talks with Lady Mormont and Lord Glover. "If the North must bleed again, let it not be at our own throat," he told them, voice hard as iron. "Bolton's leeching days end the moment he turns traitor. Until then, we watch, we wait." He did not tell Margaery everything, though she suspected. She watched him at council, noting the way his jaw set whenever Bolton's name arose, the flicker of unease in his eyes. At night, when they lay tangled beneath linen and fur, she would smooth his brow and whisper stories of Old Town and the golden orchards of the Reach, letting her words soften the heaviness on his shoulders. As harvest neared, Robb summoned a great council, lords, castellans, free-folk chieftains, maesters, and even a delegation from White Harbor's merchant princes. The great hall had not held so many since before the war, its walls festooned with banners. Direwolf and Rose foremost, but also the Bear of Mormont, the Merman of Manderley, and even the broken lance of House Reed. The gathering was tense but necessary. There were questions of grain, trade, the repairing of broken keeps, the redistribution of land where traitors had fallen. Robb stood before them all, cloak silvered with embroidery, voice strong. The North remembers, but we must also forgive. Let those who bent the knee be welcomed back, but let them prove their loyalty with works, not only words. We will not be divided, not by gold, not by southern schemes. Let all know, Wolf and Rose stand together. Those who betray us find only winter's justice. Diwonim, woe. Margaery followed, her words gentler but no less weighty. The Reach has learned to bend with the wind, to flourish in sun and shade alike. So must the North. Let us trade not only grain and goods, but wisdom. Let our children learn together. Let old feuds fade. She proposed the founding of a new school at Winterfell, where young lords and ladies of every house, North and South, could study under maesters and learn not only the sword, but letters, numbers, history, and law. There was laughter at first, but also nods. Many remembered too well how ignorance and pride had fanned the war's flames. The council resolved to see these plans made real. The Manderleys pledged ships for trade. The Mormonts sent bear hides for winter cloaks. Even the Karstarks, grim and reluctant, offered their best iron. Yet Robb's gaze never left the shadows near the door, where Bolton's envoy lingered in silence, sharp-eyed and restless. Peace, though hard won, was fragile as spun glass. The second harvest feast was a marvel, with tables groaning under roasted boar, honeyed cakes, mead, and strong ale. Sansa sang in the old tongue with the women of the village. Arya bested every squire in the archery yard, and Bran, grown taller, presided at table with a quiet confidence that made the old maester weep with pride. It was on the eve of this new happiness that news came from the Wall. Ravens, battered by storm, arrived one after another. The Night's Watch was in crisis. Jon Snow, now Lord Commander, wrote in a firm, urgent hand, "Wildlings press the gates, but worse comes behind. The dead do not sleep. I beg aid, not only men, but all the wisdom you can muster. The Wall holds, but just." Robb read the message in silence, the hall growing cold around him. When he finished, he looked to his council. The true war waits beyond our sight. We cannot ignore it, not if we hope for any peace at all. The Night's Watch stood for us when we were children. Now we must stand for them. Beyond. Arguments erupted. Some lords grumbled that they owed the watch nothing but tradition. Others that it was a southern problem. Wildlings and old ghosts best left to legends. But Margaery stood and spoke with a calm authority that stilled the noise. The North is not alone. The Wall that guards you guards us all. I will send grain, wool, and healers, and I will ride myself if I must to see this threat met. Her courage shamed many. The decision was made. Glover and Mormont would lead the first levy north, with 1,000 men, carts of food, and Margaery's own contingent of healers and women at arms. Sansa wept at the thought of Bran and Arya riding out again. But neither wavered. Robb kissed Margaery's brow the morning she departed. "I would ride with you if I could, but if trouble stirs here I must hold Winterfell." She smiled, fierce and sweet. "Then keep our hearth. I'll keep the fire burning on the road." Their parting was quieter than their wedding, quieter even than Robb's ride to war. But there was steel in it, a silent vow, stronger than banners. The journey to the Wall was perilous. The roads were choked with ice again by early frost. Wildlings moved in ragged bands on the fringes of the haunted forest, and every night the aurora danced with ghostly fire above the snows. Yet Margaery pressed on, Brienne and her guards at her side, the banners of Wolf and Rose streaming before them. At last, as the first snows of autumn fell, they reached Castle Black, its gate looming black against the silvered horizon, torches guttering in the wind. Jon Snow met them at the gate, his face lined and older than the last time Margaery had seen him. He embraced her with a brother's warmth. "You came," he said simply. "Oh, of course," Margaery replied. "We are family now, Jon. The wall will not fall while the North endures." Together, they toured the battered fortifications, watched the wildlings, now camped as uneasy guests rather than enemies, and listened to the reports of rangers, haunted and grim. The threat was real. There were more than whispers of the dead in the woods, and some rangers who rode out did not return. Margaery spent long evenings in council with Jon, Maester Aemon, and the wildling chieftains. She spoke not only as a queen, but as a healer, tending wounds, calming children, sharing news of the world beyond the wall. Her presence was a comfort. When food was short, she had it rationed with ruthless fairness. When tempers rose, she was swift to intercede. Arya, too, played her part. Among the wildling children she became legend, teaching them songs and stories, showing them how to sling stones and laugh again. As the nights lengthened and the auroras brightened, a grim peace settled. The Night's Watch, the wildlings, and the Northmen worked together, building fires, mending walls, drilling with spear and bow. Margaery stood atop the wall more than once, her hair blown wild, the world spread beneath her, a sweep of darkness and hope. Back in Winterfell, Robb ruled with steady hand. The news from the wall was grave, but heartening. The North's aid had made a difference. Bolton's messages grew more frequent, if less friendly. Reports of unrest, hints of border raids, demands for more men and food. Robb held fast. "Let Bolton starve if he will not stand with us," he told his council. "We have given enough." It was at the height of this tension that Sansa brought him a letter, sealed with a mockingbird in blue wax. Baelish. The letter was brief. The Lannisters gather in the Riverlands. Frey feuds with Blackwood. If you want peace, march south. If you want Winterfell, hold your wolves close. Robb read the letter twice. "Baelish plays all sides," he said. "But this is a warning, if only to serve his own ends." He summoned the Blackfish, Glover, Manderly, and Lady Mormont Dottai. Together, they plotted. Patrols doubled along the southern roads. Spies sent to White Harbor and the Twins. Riders dispatched to treat with the Blackwoods and Tullys, offering aid and alliance. It was a time of waiting, of anxious work, of subtle moves and countermoves. Margaery's absence was felt everywhere. Her laughter, her soft diplomacy, her ability to soothe pride and prick arrogance. Robb missed her with an ache that made every day longer, every night colder. At Castle Black, the news grew darker. More rangers vanished. Wildlings spoke of things in the woods that had not been seen in 1,000 years. Margaery wrote to Robb, her words a mixture of hope and worry. "There are shadows here, and old magic stirring. But Jon is resolute, and the watch is strong. Tell the people to trust, to endure. The dawn will come." The dawn did come, at last, with a terrible price. It was a night of storm and fire. The dead rose in the woods, pale shadows with eyes like ice, moving silent as fog. The wildlings fell back in terror. The Night's Watch manned the walls. The Northmen readied bows and pitch. Margaery stood atop the wall, her voice ringing out over the chaos. "Hold, hold fast, for the living." Jon led the countercharge, sword ablaze with blue flame, cutting down whites as they surged at the gates. Margaery directed the healers, moving from wounded to dying, never faltering, her own dagger red to the hilt. Arya fought beside her, her wolf quickness a blur among the shadow things. Brienne held the gate, felling monsters with every stroke, her armor battered and gleaming. Dawn broke with the snow, the sky a blood-streaked gray. The dead retreated, the living stood, battered, bloodied, but alive. The wall still stood. The price was high. Dozens dead, the night air thick with the wailing of mourners, but the North had not fallen. That same dawn, a raven came to Robb in Winterfell. He read the message and wept. first for those lost, then for those saved. He called the banners, sent word to every corner of the north, and prepared Winterfell for what must come. "The dead march," he said to his council. "But so do we." When Margaery returned, it was with survivors, stories, and new alliances. The wildlings now sworn to fight for the realm, the Night's Watch reborn, the Night's Watch reborn, the North's name spoken in every tongue from Skagos to the southern seas. She found Robb waiting for her at the gates, the people cheering, the banners of Wolf and Rose flying high. They embraced before all Winterfell, king and queen, partners, equals. No words were needed. The world was not saved. The wars of men and the wars of the dead still loomed. But for now, hope endured. Winterfell's walls were strong, its people united, its heart beating fierce and bright in the dark. And as the long night approached, the North prepared, not alone, but together, beneath banners that no wind or war could tear apart. And in the quiet that fell as the snows came again, the king and queen looked out over their realm, scarred, stubborn, and full of life. Whatever the cost, whatever the sorrow, they would meet what came, side by side, Wolf and Rose, winter and spring, the dream of peace alive in every heartbeat beneath the ancient stones. Dega. The years' turn brought a winter more relentless than any living man recalled, and even the old women who remembered the snows of Eris and the dark years of drought said they had never known cold to settle so deep in the bones. The winds that swept from the Frostfangs drove sharp, rattling gusts through Winterfell's towers, setting every shutter to trembling, and the days grew short and the nights impenetrably black. The hearths burned at every hour, but even the richest chamber could not always banish the bite. Smoke rose constantly from the castle's chimneys, blurring the sun, and the air hung heavy with the scent of peat and pine and cooking fat. Yet inside those walls, life throbbed with purpose. The castle, swollen with its own people and refugees from all corners of the north, was a city now. Tanners and smiths worked side by side with Tyrell bakers, Dornish peddlers, Riverrun's craftsmen, and even free folk, wildlings, some called them still, though they now wore Wolf and Rose badges at their cloaks. Children chased one another through muddy yards or built fortresses of packed snow beneath the godswood. The hall rang with the sound of hammers, laughter, and music every night. Robb was everywhere. He rose before dawn, consulting with Glover or the Blackfish in the library over new troop movements, or reading the letters from his scouts and southern spies. By sunrise he was on the training grounds with Lord Mormont, drilling men and boys alike, Arya running alongside with the youngest, Quicksilver and Wild. At midday he met with the old and new lords, Manderly, proud and full of bluster, Lady Mage Mormont, blunt as a maul, Karstark, still wary and grudging, but bound by recent oaths. Bolton, though often absent, sent his son, Ramsay, who smiled too much and talked too little. Robb watched him carefully. In the evenings, Robb presided at council beside Margaery, their hands sometimes clasped beneath the table, their arguments sometimes loud enough to silence the chamber. They disagreed, often fiercely, on how to ration food, how to deal with poachers, when to risk sending foraging parties south. But when the debates ended, their unity was always restored by the smallest touch. The court saw their bond and grew in faith. Margaery thrived in the chaos. She gave up silks and lace for wool and leather, and made a habit of eating in the kitchens or the barracks, listening as much as speaking. It was she who created the rotation for serving the wounded, teaching Tyrell healers to work beside wildling midwives, blending southern medicines with northern roots and herbs. She took Sansa as her shadow, instructing her in the art of command, how to sense the mood of a crowded hall, when to grant a boon, when to refuse. She even won over the gruffest of the Norse ladies by braving the deep snow to help with the butchering and salting of game, laughing as she slipped and fell and came up covered in blood and frost. The children of Winterfell, her stepbrothers and new kin, adored her. Rickon, all wild hair and stubborn pride, refused to eat unless Margaery was at table. Bran, taller and paler each month, confided in her as he once had in old Nan, seeking comfort in her steady optimism. Arya brought her treasures, a rook's feather, a stone shaped like a heart, a knife of obsidian she'd taken from a wildling elder. "For the dead," she said, dark eyes earnest. "Keep it close in case the whites come." Even the free folk who had once scorned southern queens called Margaery Sunmaid, their awkward word for her, and offered her trinkets and stories. She was the only one they allowed to preside at their marriages, alongside Jon Snow, when the Night's Watch rode south to bring new refugees in. News from the Wall was constant and dire. Jon's letters were short but urgent. "The dead gather in the woods. We hold by fire and steel, but each day we lose more. The Night's Watch is a shadow of itself, and the wildlings are brave but too few. Soon we will have no choice but to flee south." He sent a raven for Maester Luwin to read aloud to the council. "Send every man you can spare, and every cart of grain, for when the dead break through the wall, none will stand against them." The council was divided. Glover and Karstark argued for holding back. "Let the wall do what it's meant to, and pray the wildlings die before they bring trouble to us." Manderly and Mormont pressed for aid. "If we don't help, we'll be the next to die, and alone." Bolton's absence was noted, but his son offered empty promises of men when Dreadfort's needs are met. Sansa wept quietly for Jon. Arya only glared and muttered, "I'll go myself if no one else will." Margaery spoke when Robb had fallen silent. "We have all lost kin to the War of the Living. But what comes now is the war for the living. If we do not stand with the Watch, we doom not just the North, but every child of Westeros. This is the time for unity, not old feuds." Menmentrol. Robb made the decision, his voice iron. "We march north in a week with every man, woman, and child who can hold a spear. The wall will not fall alone." The preparations were frantic. Weapons were cleaned and oiled, horses shoed, sledges loaded with food and firewood. Winterfell smiths worked around the clock, reforging plowshares and iron grates into pikes and short swords. Margaery's healers and Sansa's seamstresses made hundreds of fresh bandages, soaked in herbs and honey, packing bundles of lard and dried fruit for the wounded. Brienne took command of Margaery's guard, 40 hand-picked women from the north, the Reach, and the wildling tribes, clad in mail and heavy cloaks. Arya was nowhere to be seen. Some whispered she'd gone ahead to scout for Jon, slipping through the snows like a wraith. Sansa stayed close to Margaery, learning as she stitched, her fingers red and raw but proud. Catelyn led prayers each dawn, standing beneath the heart tree, her face grave, her voice soft but unyielding. "Old gods and new, let us stand together. Let us not be broken." On the 7th day, as a pale sun lifted over Winterfell, the host gathered. It was a sight no living soul had seen in 100 years. A great tide of Northmen, flanked by Tyrell banners, wildling clans, even cranningmen from the swamps with their strange painted shields. At the head rode Robb and Margaery, side by side, Grey Wind and Brienne's great warhorse leading. The banners of Wolf and Rose snapped together above their heads. The march was slow and terrible. Snow blinded, drifts swallowed wagons, and wolves trailed the column, their howls haunting the night. Every village passed became a gathering point. Those able-bodied joined, the old and young pressed close to fires and prayed. Scouts brought news, raids on the roads, scattered bands of the dead moving south. Once even a party of riders in Lannister gold who fled at the first sight of the North's strength. By the time the host reached the Gift, the land south of the Wall, the army had swollen to over 12,000, not counting wildlings. Margaery moved among the camps at night, comforting the children, bringing food and hope. Robb met with Jon and the Black Brothers, devising their defense. Trenches filled with oil, barricades of sharpened logs, pits hidden by snow, every man and woman drilled in arms. It was Jon who gave the final warning. The dead don't fear fire or steel, only dragon glass and the old magic. If you have any, arm your best with it. If not, pray. Damn. The enemy came 3 nights later, on a moonless, windless night, when the sky was purple and the air so cold it cracked lips and froze water in the blink of an eye. The dead came silent and inexorable, their eyes blue stars in the darkness. They moved through the trees like fog, Swords and axes rusted but sharp, arrows falling from the sky like black rain. The battle was chaos and horror. The dead overwhelmed the first barricade. Wildlings screamed and died. The trenches burned blue and green as the old magics flared to life. Jon fought like a man possessed, his sword a streak of fire. Robb and Grey Wind led the center, Margaery directing her guard and the wounded, Sansa carrying arrows to the lines, Arya striking in the darkness with her obsidian blade. Brienne was everywhere, her voice ringing out commands, her sword red and black with gore. Twice the lines broke, twice they rallied. Glover died beside the king, Karstark fell holding a banner high. Mormont women fought in the thick of the worst, and Manderly's men held the left when all seemed lost. In the end it was not swords that won the night, but unity, north and south, old and new, wild and gentle, all standing together. The dead retreated with the dawn, their numbers broken. The field was a charnel house. Robb was wounded, a gash at the ribs, shallow but bloody. Jon was missing a chunk of hair and bleeding from the ear. Arya's face was smeared with ash, Sansa's with tears. Margaery moved among the living, her voice soft but unbreakable, binding wounds, giving hope. The days that followed were a blur of burial and rebuilding. The wall still stood, battered but defiant. The survivors counted themselves lucky and prayed for no second night like the last. As spring finally came, thawing the last snows, there was no question of returning to old ways. The free folk who had fought became kin. The Tyrells built new villages in the Gift, planting gardens where the dead had trod. Sansa and Arya helped design a new school, one that taught the old runes, the faith of the Seven, and the skills of both southern lords and northern warriors. Robb and Margaery's rule was secure. When banners flew for them, they flew for hope, for unity, for the promise that winter's grip could be broken. Their first child, a girl, fierce and laughing, was born as the apple trees in the Godswood flowered. She was named Eddora after the old king and the promise of new life. No realm was without trouble. Bolton stirred in the east, the Lannisters rebuilt in the west, and whispers of old magic flickered in the deep woods. But Winterfell stood at the heart of the north, strong and warm, a beacon. The wolf and the rose had changed the world, and all who passed beneath their banners knew it. In the end, it was not the wars or the dead that made the legend, but the living, the way they came together, the stories they forged, the hope that would not die. In Winterfell, in the heart of the long summer, the king and queen looked out upon their people, scarred, stubborn, and full of life, and knew that whatever the world brought, they would endure. Together, beneath the banners of wolf and rose, the north and south were one. And as the seasons turned, their tale spread beyond the hills and rivers, beyond the wall and the sea, a story for every hearth in Westeros. That unity could outlast any winter, and hope was the seed from which kingdoms are born. The summer that followed was not a true summer, but something half remembered from before the wars and the long cold. A lingering warmth, a softening in the wind, a quickening in the green things that grew in the cracks between stones. The north was scarred, the land patchy with fire black and regrowth, but beneath the ruins hope rooted itself deeper than ever. Every day in Winterfell brought another arrival. A farmer from the rills with his ragged children, a wildling spearwife in search of honest work, a Riverlands mason bearing a letter sealed with a blackwood tree. Each was welcomed, their names written by Maester Luwin's apprentice in careful script, each given shelter, a place by the hearth, a task suited to hand and heart. Robb and Margaery moved through this world as the sun and the moon, sometimes together, sometimes apart, but always aware of the other's pull. Robb rode patrols along the old King's Road and into the Barrowlands, where he found ruined hamlets and newly planted fields, teaching boys to hold a spear and hearing old men's grievances. His face was more weathered, his laughter rarer but truer when it came. He rode unarmored except for a wolf's head brooch and the blade at his side, Grey Wind pacing him like a silent shadow, drawing smiles and awe wherever they went. When he returned to Winterfell, battered from a long ride. It was to Margaery's arms, to her counsel in the council chamber, and her laughter in the quiet of their chamber at night. Margaery's time was spent as much in the yards as in the halls. She supervised planting, weighed the granaries, and heard the small folks' petitions with Sansa at her side. Sansa, grown into womanhood, no longer the girl of songs but a measured voice of justice and gentle wisdom. Margaery walked the villages with a basket on her arm, and a guard of girls in rough-spun wool behind her, Brienne at their head, unbending and loyal. Margaery brought with her not only the gold of the Reach, but the stubborn charity of her own heart, and she matched it with a northern sternness she'd learned it through trial. Her name became a byword for fairness and resolve, her smile for comfort, her eyes for unblinking truth. It was not only peace that marked this summer, but a transformation. The free folk, newly sworn to the north, were given lands on the edge of the Gift, where Jon Snow rode often, counseling their chieftains, settling disputes between spearwives and Stark bannermen. Some Northmen grumbled at this. Wildlings are wildlings, whatever badge they wear. But Margaery countered with bread and law, and Robb with stern orders. They bled for us at the Wall and at the Gift. Any man who would see them starve is no Northman at all. When the first harvest came, it was the wildlings who brought carts heaped with turnips and barley to Winterfell, setting them in the square with shy pride. Arya was restless as ever, rarely within the walls. She ranged far, from White Harbor to the edge of the mountains, teaching girls the knife and boys the sling. Rumor called her the Wolf Queen's shadow. Some said she could slip through walls, that she'd killed a dozen bandits with a single stroke. Sansa smiled at these tales, and never corrected them. When Arya did return, she always brought gifts. A white hart's antler, a bundle of river mint, once even a crannog frog tied with rushes. She would slip in at dusk, share a meal with her siblings and Margaery, then vanish again, sometimes with a word, more often with a wink. The castle itself changed as well. The great hall was expanded, its roof repaired, its tapestries remade in a style that mixed the Reach's color with northern symbols. Leaves and flowers, deery wolves and suns, woven together so that each was distinct but none outshone the other. Manderley masons laid new stone for the gatehouse, and Tyrell carpenters roofed the barracks and built long tables for the growing company at every meal. Bran, now nearly grown, designed new ramps and bridges so that carts and chairs could cross the bailey without trouble. Rickon, as wild as Arya, tamed a pair of wolf pups, swearing to raise them into the next generation of protectors. Catelyn Stark, a shadow through the hard winter, emerged with spring. She took counsel with the wise women, organized the rebuilding of outlying manors, and served as judge when border disputes erupted. With her grief gentled by the years, she became a pillar, her voice quiet, her judgment respected by all. She walked with Margaery in the Godswood often. Their talks long in private, sometimes laughter, sometimes tears. They grieved for the lost, Ned, Robb's old bannerman, Jane Westerling, who had perished in childbed during the wars, and so many others, but they built always toward the future. Word spread beyond the north. At first it was slow. A trader who carried a tale to Old Town, a hedge knight who journeyed to the Vale and spoke of a king who shared the board with common men. Then the envoys came, Martell and Tully, Blackwood and Hightower, even an iron-born ship flying a white banner for parley. Some brought news, some tribute, all brought questions. How did the North thrive, so far from the gold and the grain of the South? How did a Southern queen command such loyalty among rough men and wilder folk? Robb and Margaery answered together, their words plain and their actions plainer. When Blackwood sought help in holding their lands against Lannister raids, Robb sent riders and food. When Martell sent envoys to barter for timber and furs, Margaery hosted them with olive oil and honeyed wine. In every treaty, she insisted, the price of peace was justice. No more broken promises, no more secret claws beneath velvet gloves. Some resented her demands. Most came to respect her. But not all news was good. From the Dreadfort came whispers of Ramsay, the bastard of Bolton, whose cruelty was said to surpass even his father's. 3 villages disappeared along the eastern marches, and those who returned spoke of flayed corpses, gutted barns, burned fields. Margaery called council, her face drawn, and her eyes dark as ice. "This cannot stand. We must send a message. The North will not be terrorized, not by any who claim to serve it." Robb agreed. He rode east with 200 men, including wildling trackers and Brienne at his side, Margaery's banner trailing his own. They moved swift as wolves, striking at night, rooting out Bolton's men wherever they found them. The dread fort was not besieged, but its lands were stripped of plunder and its villages freed. Ramsay himself vanished into the woods. His father sent only a cold apology and a promise to curb the excesses of youth. Robb rode back, his words iron. "There will be no more cruelty, no more fear. The next blood you spill will be answered in kind." When he returned, it was to cheers in the yard and the silent thanks of every widow and orphan freed from Bolton's terror. Margaery met him at the gate, her cloak lined with the white foxes of the north, and kissed him before the assembled company. That night, beneath the stars, they walked the walls together, their talk low and full of plans. Yet war was never far. Across the neck, Lannister banners stirred again. Baelish, ever slippery, sowed discord in the riverlands, and the Iron Islands sent swift ships up the stony shore, raiding lonely farmsteads. Each threat was met in turn. Riders sent to rally the river lords, letters dispatched to the Eyrie, ravens flown to Old Town. At each challenge, the council grew closer, no longer north against south, but one family, one court. One night, as the winds howled through the cracks in the ancient stone, Margaery called Sansa and Bran and Arya to her chambers. By the firelight, she unrolled a map of Westeros. "We will not wait for the world to come to us," she said. "If the South seeks war, we answer with peace. If the East sows terror, we meet it with justice. And if any man, be he lion, kraken, or wolf, breaks faith, we answer together." Sansa nodded. "Winterfell is strong because we stand as one. Let the realm see what unity means." Arya grinned, flashing her knife. "Let them come. I've more tricks to teach." "Dat war." Bran only watched, his eyes ancient in the firelight. "The world is changing. Magic is returning, and with it new dangers. But I see hope, here, in this room." Outside, the banners of wolf and rose whipped in the wind, the symbols of a dream made real. With the season's turn, a great tournament was called at Winterfell, not for war, but for games and skill, for stories and song. Knights and free folk, children and elders, gathered from every land. There were foot races on the ramparts, archery in the yard, and riddles by firelight. Sansa judged the songs, Bran the riddles, Arya the contests of arms. The prize, given by Robb and Margaery together, was a silver cup engraved with a wolf's head and a single rose. It went to a wildling girl, barely 13, who bested all in the spear throw and could recite the histories of both Stark and Tyrell. That night, the feast stretched till dawn, and for the first time since the wars, laughter rang unbroken from the kitchens to the towers. Old grudges slipped away. New vows were sworn, some in love, some in fealty, all beneath the old gods and the new. As autumn crept near, the work continued. Fields were reaped, stores refilled, roads repaired. The North grew richer, not in gold but in strength. Alliances forged in fire and hardship, trust stronger than stone. Children born that summer were named for hope: Edera, Jonella, Marna, Will, and dozens of others. Robb and Margaery's daughter grew swiftly, her hair copper in the sun, her laugh wild and unafraid. She toddled through the halls, sometimes with Sansa or Arya at her side, sometimes astride Grey Wind, who seemed to sense the future in her scent. And the king and queen, through all, were constant, unbowed, unbroken, united. At night, as they watched the northern lights dance over the wall, they spoke of dreams yet to come. Peace was not certain, nor was safety, but neither was it a hope out of reach. They would meet each trial together, as they had since first, their hands joined beneath the heart tree, as the North and South had since the day Wolf wed rose. In time, the tale spread beyond Westeros. Minstrels carried it east and west, across sea and mountain, the song of a king and queen who forged a realm from ruin and made it new. And in every telling, the lesson endured, that in unity there is strength, in mercy, power, and that even after the longest winter, spring may come again, bearing the banners of wolf and rose. Thus, in the years that followed, Winterfell was more than a castle, more than a city. It was a symbol, the heart of a realm that had endured all that darkness could bring, and chosen each day to stand together against it. And in the hearts of its people, and the legends that followed, the North and South were never again so far apart.